It's a sunny day here in California, 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Hope all you drivers on Highway 1 are okay. It's looking a little... Jesus Christ, Caitlin. It's been 2 hours. Jessica didn't raise her voice. She said it to the window, like asking the glass for a different answer. It's a long road, I said. What, 100 miles? I did the math anyway. 2 hours at 60. We should have passed Hearst Castle by now. The radio came back. Same man, bright as a postcard. Clear tonight along the coast, no rain, and absolutely no... Jessica huffed a laugh. Absolutely no what? I tapped the dash. This is why I still listen to the radio. People who pay attention get rewarded with... She held up her phone. 0 bars. Great. I checked mine. Nothing. Okay, we still have the map. We'll pull over before it gets fully dark. We didn't pull over right away. I let the idea sit while the sun lost half an inch. Cliffs to our left were copper. The forest to the right had begun to turn that glassy blue where you stop seeing depth. Caitlin, Jessica said, please. Next turnout, I said. I just don't want to... The radio interrupted, cheerful to the point of silly. Miss those views, folks. Beautiful along the Santa Lucia tonight. And if you're thinking of stretching your legs, don't. If you get out of the car, you'll die. Humidity, 98%. My hand tightened on the wheel. The tires hummed. I let us glide down into the next wide turnout and stop anyway, nose toward the drop, ocean working below like a machine we couldn't see. We sat a second with the engine idling. The AC made the soft cardboard flap sound it always made at 3. I put the car in park and cracked the glove box. Is that legal? Jessica asked. For them to say that? It's a prank. It felt thinner than paper as I said it. We wrestled the map out. Florida ended up on her shoulder. Texas bridged the console. I pulled California toward the last of the light on my side window. Let's just use the hood, Jessica said. This is stupid. The radio brightened, as if pleased to be helpful. Lock those doors, it is very close now. And for our Highway 1 listeners, wow, that heat is finally breaking. Let's get you some... Jessica flinched, then ripped the map, then stared at me. What the fuck, Caitlin? If you paid for some stupid bit? I didn't. I looked past her to the tree line. The gaps between the trunks were the color of a turned-off screen. There was a shallow opening about 20 yards in, a little veg of a clearing that felt like a missing tooth. A pair of headlights came around the bend behind us. Lights swept both mirrors. Jessica's shoulders sagged. Thank God. See? People. Wait, I said, only because the word was there. The radio dropped its smile into the same sentence. And if you're thinking of flagging them down, don't. Visibility excellent. Surf calm. Jessica already had a hand on the latch. I'm just going to wave. 2 seconds. Jess. I heard my voice and didn't like how thin it was. Just wait a second. I checked the rear view. A face was on the glass, not reflected on it. Skin a primer white, pores erased by pressure. A nose flattened like clay under a palm. The eyes were too open, tracked red like somebody had been trying not to blink for a contest and lost. It leaned harder, and the glass made a dry sound, a click like a thumbnail on a jar. The dome light didn't come on. No door had moved. I was frozen. Jess, I said, but she had already pushed the latch. The passenger door sighed a few inches, and the car filled with the temperature of outside. Caitlin? Jessica said. She wasn't looking at the rear glass. She was watching me watch it, and something in my face made her mouth shape change. This isn't funny. I swallowed. I didn't know how to describe the wrongness without giving it more weight than the car could hold. The headlights behind us washed over again. In that flash, the face should have lit or shadowed, done something. It didn't. It pressed. The ridge above the eyes made 2 pale crescents. I reached across and caught Jessica's arm. Don't, I said. Please. Just lock it. Lock the door. She stared at my hand on her sleeve, then at the open wedge of night outside. The forest smell edged in. Dry bark, cold. The AC blew against it but didn't move it. The radio delivered, bright as a tour guide. Doors locked make for safer travel. Keep those hands inside the vehicle. Perfect driving conditions ahead. The latch under my hand twitched. Jessica was stronger than I was expecting. The door opened another inch, then another, then all at once with that hollow car door sound that eats the last of the cabin. "Jessica," I said. I wanted to say her full name like it could anchor her. "Jessica, don't." She stepped out onto the gravel, one foot, then the other, her shoulders still turned towards me like this could be a joke I would end. She left the door open. The dome light came on and made the interior look like a set. The headlights from behind crested the bend. I looked up into the mirror. The rear glass was clean. No print, no smear, no face. Just the ocean beyond it and the long white scribble of a wave chasing itself along the cliff. "Jess?" I said. No answer. The open door looked at the trees. The turnout had that Sunday evening quiet, a big empty that pretends to be safe. "Jess!" I leaned over the passenger seat and looked out, across the hinge, into the blue of the woods. Nothing. Not an engine, not a footstep, not the cheap clack of her sandal on gravel. The radio, with perfect cheer, slid a new sentence in between jazz. "Hope all you Highway 1 drivers are okay." I waited for the rest of the line, the part that would finish my thought for me. It didn't. I wasn't supposed to be driving that night. Pat was our designated driver, but they forgot about halfway through the night and started drinking heavily. I, having nursed the same cocktail up until I saw them getting red in the face and wobbly, knew my libations were over with then and there, and that their responsibility was now mine. I was annoyed, but since I hadn't intended on getting shit-faced that evening, I suppose Pat thought sobriety was wasted on them and figured I'd all but offered to take their place. In any case, once the night was done, I helped Pat and our other friends, Cynthia and James, into the car and slipped into the driver's seat. Pat was mumbling something about what a great friend I was and got nothing but daggers from me in return. The other two passed out before they even buckled up, forcing me to lean over them like a mother to secure them in place. Was I this bad when I drank? Another flash of annoyance hit me. They could all sleep soundly, leaving me alone having to stay alert and awake to play taxi for them. What's more, I wasn't so keen on driving specifically Pat home. See, there's this tunnel between their house and center town, and while it's just an ordinary tunnel as far as everyone else is concerned, I can't stand it. It makes my skin crawl because of something that happened when I was a kid. Honestly, it scares the shit out of me. I usually take a different route just so I can avoid it, but doing so adds an hour to the trip, and at 2 in the morning in a car that stank of crusted puke, I made the mistake of picking the tunnel. I want to be clear that when I said the tunnel scared me, I could never have predicted what happened that night. When I was a kid, my brother told me the tunnel was the mouth of a giant, and the only way to survive was to hold my breath the whole way through. Stupid in hindsight, but kids believed the weirdest superstitions. So I held my breath until I couldn't, until the world was almost nothing but darkness with a few small spots of light. And then I let in the faintest of inhales and heard a shriek coming from the other end of the tunnel. I was convinced I'd made the giant aware of me, and now we were going to die. Can you imagine experiencing the genuine, honest-to-goodness fear of death at that age? Now, of course, since I'm writing this, I didn't die in the belly of a monster. Instead, I hyperventilated with my hands slapped over my mouth, bracing myself for the worst until we came upon a wreck. Someone had lost control of their vehicle and had driven right into the tunnel wall. That was the sound that I'd heard. I didn't see a simple accident, though. Through the lens of a child's imagination, I saw the twisted metal as a car gnashed by the teeth of the giant. I saw the accident as somehow being my fault, all because I took a breath. I never wanted to go through that tunnel again after that, and if I had to, I held my breath the entire time just in case. As I got older, that fear morphed into avoidance of the tunnel. Which leads us to this story. To me, pulling up along the side of the road near the mouth of the tunnel with my 3 friends passed out in the passenger seats. I think I was more anxious than scared. Something about the way the wind moved through the entrance put me on edge. I could hear the howl even with the windows rolled up. I figured I'd wait for another car to drive in first. It felt a little silly, but you know what they say, safety in numbers. It wasn't long before a little Corolla passed me and was engulfed in the darkness. I hit the gas and followed behind, trying not to be too creepy about it. It was nice to see the taillights blazing the trail in front of me. I followed it to about the halfway point of the tunnel, to the point where I used to start struggling to hold my breath. I could feel myself unintentionally holding it now. So far, it was going fine, and I even started to relax a little. It was the calm before the storm. Suddenly, something weird happened. The car in front of began to shrink, as though it had violently sped up. I accelerated to give chase, not wanting to lose its light, but no matter how fast I went, the distance between us only grew. I couldn't hear the revving of its engine, and I couldn't understand why or how it was going so fast so quietly. It kept shrinking, illuminating what seemed like ever-encroaching tunnel walls. I would have stopped and turned around if I wasn't sure it was only an optical illusion. Likewise, I would have turned around if I'd realized I should have been long out of the tunnel by then. Sometimes you miss the forest for the trees, and that Corolla was my tree. By the time the Corolla became a blip on the horizon, I realized I was white-knuckling the steering wheel. I stopped focusing on my convoy partner, slowed, and took in the surroundings. Where was the left lane? Gone, I realized. I was tucked between narrow tunnel walls, with the roof so low, if I'd been driving a van, the top would have scraped against it. My first thought was that I somehow veered into a maintenance tunnel, and I was lucky I hadn't scratched Pat's car in the process. And then I noticed how dark it was. With the Corolla now completely out of view and no hanging lights, I could only see as far as my headlights shined. Everything beyond that was pitch black, like in the deepest recesses of the ocean. I wasn't sure how far into the maintenance tunnel I was, nor whether it looped back to rejoin the main road. I didn't have room to turn the car around, and the thought of backing up the whole way filled me with a potent sense of dread. I didn't want to not look forward. Something told me I needed to keep my eyes on the road ahead. What was safer, the road not traveled, or the road I could barely see because Pat cheaped out and didn't get LEDs for his taillights? I swallowed a knot of apprehension, imagining myself in the throat of the giant. I tried to open the door, but I found the wall was so tight I had room to squeeze one foot out. Had the tunnel gotten narrower? No, there was no way. I closed the door and decided to keep going. If nothing else, I hoped the tunnel would widen enough for me to turn at some point. But I took it slow, the tires crackling beneath me. There was movement in my peripheral vision, and my eyes shot to the side view mirror where I could have sworn I saw the concrete buckle behind me. I grit my teeth and tried to shove Pat awake, to no avail. I could feel my skin, every inch of it. It's like I was suddenly hyper-aware of myself. It itched. Blood rushed to my head, and I swear I could feel my eyeballs move. I needed to expand. I needed to get out of the oppressive closeness. The walls were getting tighter. My throat was getting tighter. Breathing was getting harder. Was it my imagination? I smacked Pat in desperation, and although I wanted to try Cynthia and James, I couldn't bring myself to look in the back seat. I don't know why, but something in my gut told me if I turned around, I'd find a concrete wall encasing me in the front. I don't know if it was stubborn or stupid not to turn around. I don't know if it was false hope or logic or fear. I have no idea what compelled me to keep going, even as I began to hear the grinding of metal on concrete, even as my nails dug into the steering wheel and splintered, even as I grit my teeth trying to will the tunnel to release me. That's when I heard a slap. It was strong. Wham! Against Pat's door. When I dared to look, the blood drained from my face. There was something in the wall, something coming out of the wall more like. Rocky fingers attached to palms squeezing against the glass. The wall rippled like a wave, and the hands roded, giving chase. I sped up, not knowing whether I was being led like a lamb to the slaughter or closer to my salvation. The hands kept pace, following me at 80 kilometers per hour like it was nothing. The walls were getting tighter. I was entombed in darkness. The walls were moving, solid but malleable, soft like liquid concrete, but when they hit the car, sparks flew. I realized I was screaming. I pushed down on the accelerator, testing the speed of the car. The hands followed. More hands. I could see them in the rearview mirror, in the side mirrors, in front of me. They were everywhere, scratching and tapping at the car, trying to get in. I was still screaming so loud, my throat turned to sandpaper. Faces began to pull away from the walls, mouths and eyes and noses stretching out like shapes pushed through fabric. I couldn't tell whether I was still screaming or if the yowls I heard were coming out of these concrete mouths. I just knew I needed to keep going. I needed to reach safety. I couldn't let them catch me. Catch me. Suddenly, I heard the familiar click of the door handle being pulled. Pat's door. In any other context, the sound would be so heart-stoppingly terrifying. In this one, it pushed me beyond the edge, in a place so deep in the well of horror that I became almost numb. My nervous system couldn't handle the sensory and panic overload. I think it's resignation. I think the realm beyond fear is a kind of acceptance to your fate, to your inevitable death. It's a kindness your body offers you in the last moments of your life, so that an imprint of fear isn't left behind when your soul leaves your body. Or maybe it's for your loved ones, so they can see you died peacefully and can move on easier than if you kicked the bucket in wild thrashes of agonizing fear, begging for help and sobbing. Point being, when the door began to jostle open, I felt this wave of near calm and closed my eyes to let it happen. I took my hands off the steering wheel and slowly released the gas pedal. And then there was silence. There was no longer the grinding sound of metal on concrete, no screaming, no tapping or scraping or anything else like that. I opened my eyes in time to see the car puttering out of the tunnel, finally, with the night sky blissfully far away and the tree line giving me a wide berth. The false calm turned into relief. The relief soured into fear as I thought about what had just happened, and it all sank in. You hear stories of injured people capable of incredible feats to save themselves, and the moment they reach safety, they collapse. That was me, essentially. I drove the car a bit farther down the road and pulled off to the side. The stress had me shaking violently, and I could barely get my legs out of the car. I fell on all fours. I must have looked like a drunk. As I reeled on the grass, I could hear Cynthia and James waking up and asking questions from the back seat. Trivial, why are we stopped, or where are we? I couldn't care less what they were saying. Now, you know what you're thinking. The second I closed my eyes and accepted my fate, I was freed from the tunnel. It must have been all a bad dream or some weird allegory for dealing with my childhood fear. You would be wrong. The car was scraped to all hell. There were dents in the metal shaped like large hands. And then there was Pat. Pat, the designated driver who got drunk and forced me to take their place that night. Pat, my friend since grade school. Pat, who, for the duration of the tunnel, had been unresponsive to my screams and shakes and pleas to wake up. Pat, who was dead. Their face twisted in abject horror, as though they woke up just in time to see death coming for them. Pat, who hadn't had time to go through the stages of fear and reach that bliss before the end. The reason I now believe that the peace is more for everyone else's sake than one's own. Because now I know they died screaming. I know exactly what they felt like in those final moments, because I'd felt every rung from that ladder of fear. But I had survived to tell the tale. Ultimately, Pat's death was ruled a heart attack. Officials think I fell asleep at the wheel, causing the car to veer into the wall before regaining control, which makes no sense. The scratches were on all surfaces of the car, even the undercarriage. But I suppose they were looking for an explanation, whether true or false. As for the tunnel, I don't intend to ever drive through it ever again. But from my research, I know one thing I didn't know when it happened. There is no maintenance tunnel. There's just the main road, which means the only mistake I made that night was ever driving into the mouth of the beast in the first place. Don't be alarmed if the road feels a few minutes longer every time you drive it. That's because it is. As the road lengthens, new side streets may appear. Do not take these, however alluring. Gas stations may pop up to fill in stretches of empty desert. Be wary of purchasing snack brands from them you have never heard of, or that do not exist. Cacti will show up every few miles that weren't there on your last drive. These are just cacti. No need to fear the cacti. If your drive on Route 333 takes more than 30 minutes than the last time, report such fluctuations immediately. Multiple former employees who failed to report such anomalies are still stuck there. Still driving. Employee Handbook, Section 7C. It was about the time I graduated from undergrad and finally braved checking on the empty void that was my bank account that I realized three things. Perhaps an English degree hadn't been the smartest choice for replenishing the aforementioned empty void that was my bank account. I could no longer live in student housing. I had utterly no idea what to do with my life. All of those, along with a healthy mix of typical Gen Z stress, depression, insert anxiety disorder here, were probably the reasons I responded to the advert in my mailbox for trucking positions along the Pacific Coast. I didn't actually expect anything to come of my application, but the company responded immediately and offered to pay for a trip to go out and talk with them. I'd never been to California, so why not? Besides your typical interview questions, the only other thing they had me do was a skill assessment. All you have to do is take a freight truck to the turnaround point and come back. The interviewing manager, Randall, dangled a set of keys in front of me. He seemed like a nice enough guy, if a bit guarded. Not too difficult. You look like a competent boy. I don't need a commercial driver's license. I'd actually driven the campus shuttle for 2 years during college, but it hadn't been a large enough bus to need a commercial license. I'd made that clear on my application. Do you think you're able to drive a rig of this size? Well, yeah, but then don't worry about it, Randall told me. How far is the turnaround? I asked. For most, it's 4 hours, but it could be less. That's what we're testing you on. So you want me to speed in a 5-ton vehicle that I don't have a license for? More like 15 tons and absolutely not. Don't speed. That would taint the results. We want to time how long it takes you naturally. The logic made no sense. Don't speed, but cross your fingers it goes quick. But it didn't matter anymore. The whole situation was sketchy. This was multiple levels of illegal, and federal prison wasn't what I imagined the keynote speaker meant by seize every opportunity in her graduation speech. I was steeling myself to tell all this to Randall and walk straight out of the office when I forgot to mention, he said, $800 in compensation for your time. 10 minutes later, I was in the cab, turning the key. I noticed another man, similar age to me, sitting in the idling cab of another semi just across the parking lot. Another applicant, Randall explained. It's easier for us to time multiple of you at the same time. The other man gave me a friendly wave, then just as pleasantly flipped me off, which was such a confusing series of events, I decided to log it away for later to process fully. Dead meat, he mouthed, though it could just as easily have been red beets. What's the address of the turnaround? I asked, waving my phone to show the open Google Maps app. No phones, Randall said. Instead, he explained how I would recognize the turnaround point, a red-roofed, unmanned weighing station some way down Route 333, along with a few other basic guidelines. 1. Don't use your phone for any reason, not even for music. Leave it on airplane mode, or better yet, just power it off. Even if there's an emergency, use the handheld radio. 2. Do feel free to listen to the stereo, though. Station 86.9 FM is country if that's your thing, but probably steer clear of station 96.5. 3. No picking up hitchhikers, not even if they look like they're hurt, not even if they're begging and crying for a ride, especially if they're begging and crying for a ride. Really, don't. 4. Around halfway there, your rig will stall and come to a stop. Don't panic, don't turn it off, don't get out. Put it in park and wait exactly 1 minute and 47 seconds. After that, the engine should start back up. If for some reason the rig doesn't start after that time, Well, it should. But if it doesn't? I asked. He said, hide. Close your eyes until it does, but it should. Okay, then. He told me these were all spelled out with more details in the employee handbook when I undoubtedly tried asking more questions. You shouldn't have to worry about most of them unless you get the job. Just don't use your phone, and most importantly, don't freak out when the rig stalls. But how do you already know it's going? He raised his hands and signaled no more questions. $800, I reminded myself. There's something slightly soul-sucking in the realization of how low a price you can be bought for. Then again, there's something soul-sucking in being a broke, unemployed college grad. So pick your poison. One last thing, Randall tells me from underneath the window. Whatever you see, whatever happens, never stop driving. Not at all ominous. He winked. I watched as the other interviewee pulled away first. My competitor, I decided now that I really did have a second to process his introduction. Twat. After I'd adjusted my mirrors and seat, I pulled out after him, highly aware of the timer in Randall's hand as he shrank to a pinprick in my rear view. The most nerve-wracking part of the whole experience, no GPS. I wasn't worried about getting lost. The instructions were basically to drive straight on Route 333 until I arrived. But there was something disconcerting about knowing if I did get lost, I wasn't allowed to look my location. I don't think I'd ever actually driven anywhere new without my phone. I already know what you boomers out there will say. My generation is soft, we never learn to do things the hard way, we're addicted to technology. To which I'll respond, true, fair, really, but also you try giving up your iPhone. The first minutes of the drive went smooth. The highway was a bit twisty, but otherwise calm, with a gorgeous view. Gargantuan trees, some variant of redwood, I assumed, towered over me from every side. But pretty as it was, the two-lane road was practically deserted. No other cars passed me, none snuck up behind me. I flipped on my headlights to deal with the shade. It was a bit eerie, truthfully. After a while, I started catching glimpses of the competitor man's truck through the trees. I'd pass a bend and his truck would flash between branches and trunks. He'd disappear around turns, but I was catching up. How to get around him? The road was thin, and if this was some sort of a speed race, there was no way he'd pull over to let me get by. Maybe another lane would open up soon? Maybe if I honked, it would spook him enough to let me pass. Turns out it didn't matter. Just as I was solidly behind him, my truck went silent. There was no sputter of life eking from a motor, nor the dying cough of an engine. The gas pedal simply stopped working. My rig slowed some more, then stopped. I was prepared for this. I waited. In my head, I counted. Randall knew. Somehow he knew my rig would sputter out at some point, but he didn't seem concerned. Was it planned? Some way to see how we reacted in stressful situations? I found myself wildly looking around for a security camera. Don't be paranoid. Just like he told me, somewhere around second 100 and whatever, the engine roared back to life. My freight truck chugged forward, and when I applied gas, it sped up. All right then. The rest of the drive was blessedly mundane. I never caught back up to competitor man, but smooth otherwise. At some point, the trees petered out to a short stretch of desert highway, and then the red-roofed weighing station. I slowed and looked at the time. This couldn't be right. I'd only been driving for half an hour or so, and the other truck had never passed me. Randall said it usually took several hours to get here. This couldn't be the correct place. It was, though. It had to be. I was still on the Route 333, I was sure of it. This was the first weighing station, and the description matched perfectly. I pulled out the digital camera Randall had given me and snapped a picture. If I was wrong, at least I could claim stupidity, not that I'd been trying to cheat. Maybe that would be enough. I maneuvered the rig through the unmanned station and headed back the way I'd come. Eventually, I reached the redwoods. The world transformed from sunlight back to shadow and mist. tendrils of fog wafted above exposed roots. I'd be back in just a few minutes now. Then the truck started to slow. I swore, not again. Sure enough, though, the rig came to a stop in a section of the forest so shaded it could have been evening. Bugs sped in and out of the headlight beams. Something was off. Nerves, I told myself. This whole thing is strange, so you're overthinking. That was usually the problem. Overthinking, spiraling until I shut down. It was the reason I majored in a subject that let me be quiet and clack away on my laptop. It was the reason I got a job on the campus shuttle where I wouldn't have to talk to anybody and applied for this position in the first place. It had been building for months, years maybe, this feeling that something in my life was wrong, off. But after I'd gone through and eliminated the only things it could be, all I was left with was me. The thing that was broken was me, and maybe that wasn't something I could realistically run away from, but I could sure try. For the first time in months, while driving Route 333, I'd felt normal and the thrill of the leaving something behind. But now I was stopped, stagnant, and it was all back again. And then another realization. How long has it been? I hadn't counted this time. There hadn't been a need after last time, but it felt like at least a few minutes had passed, maybe? I started counting in my head. 20, 45, 60. I gave up. It had definitely been longer than a minute 47. The truck still wasn't moving. The first cold edges of true fear crept into me, up my spine and snaking around my heart. I waited some more. I swore some more. When neither of those delightfully brilliant options worked, I put the truck in park, cracked the door, and hopped down. Outside was chillier than I'd imagined. Weird. Sure, it was shady, but it was still summer. I considered trying to pop the hood of this thing. For some reason, all men, even those of us with no mechanical knowledge, feel a sense of control by ponderously examining broken engines. But for a massive beast like this, I couldn't pretend to know where to start. "Hello?" I called. In the mist, off in the distance, there almost looked like a figure. Fog rolled through and they vanished. Maybe they live around here? Maybe I could ask them for help. When the mist cleared, there was nobody. Hide. That's what Randall had told me, albeit offhandedly. Hide and close your eyes. But that just felt silly, some way for him to distract me from realizing he'd stuck me with a crappy vehicle. Either way, I needed to go back in for my phone. Forget the rules, I was calling for help. The handle was locked. I rounded to the other side and tried that handle too. Locked. Incessant swearing might not have solved my problems the first 2 times, but no reason not to try in a third, right? The coldness clutched my heart until I could barely breathe. I watched as more mist rolled into the trees, and the figure, it was back. Closer. For a second time, I almost called out for help. Hide. Before I could overthink my overthinking, before I could question how stupid I'd look, I dropped to my stomach and rolled under the truck. Then I squeezed my eyes shut. A set of footsteps approached the vehicle. I started to look up, but stopped myself and pressed my face to the asphalt where I wouldn't be tempted. Another set joined it. Then another. They started moving faster, in no particular pattern around the rig. A dozen pittering dog's feet, except heavier, more intentional, frantic. Something tried at the door handles. I could hear the frustrated yank over and over. They were searching the area, looking for a way in. Don't look. Don't look. Don't. Above me, the engine roared to life. All at once, the 100 desperate footsteps stopped completely. I wasted no time. I rolled from my hiding spot, scrambled across a deserted road for the now unlocked door, and threw the rig into drive. Within seconds, I was hurtling back down the highway towards safety. That's it, I thought. I passed my twisted test, and now I get to return safely and refuse this sick job once and for all. And that was all true. I was safe. I would get to scream at Randall, just not before seeing what was behind the next turn. It came from nowhere. I swerved like crazy to avoid it. By the time I even processed what was obstructing the road, I'd already passed it with no chance of slowing back down. It had been my competitor's truck, totally stopped, diagonal across the whole road, and the man who'd been driving it, he'd been splayed across the hood, skewered through the tree branch the length of a door. His eyes had been torn out. What was that? Now, let's not get too excited. Randall looked up from his desk, back at the truck yard. What were those things? Who did that to the other guy? Other guy? He was stabbed by a tree. His eyes were literally empty sockets. Randall sighed. Not the sigh of, oh no, there's a crazy man yelling at me. The sigh of, oh great, more paperwork. Unit 50, there's a cleanup a few miles in. Sounds like a messy one. Maybe give it an hour to let the forest dwellers settle down before going in for a retrieval. Cleanup? We have to call the police. We're not calling anybody. They prefer not to know about these things. We can't just leave him there. I know you're in shock, but as I said, let's try to calm ourselves. Yelling isn't helping anyone. I get it. We'll make sure to retrieve him. It's totally understandable why you'd turn back early. Early? For some reason, it was this odd, insignificant fact that finally yanked me from my frenzy. As unjust as murder might be, to a recent graduate, nothing will ever top the injustice of being failed on a test I know I passed. I didn't come back early. His eyebrows pinched. I pulled out the digital camera and shoved the image of the turnaround point in his face. Slowly, his expression opened up to one of shock and awe. You were gone an hour, maybe an hour 30 at most, Randall considered. Then he stood, smiled, and stuck out his hand. You've got a job. I've got a... What? Have you not been listening? I just saw a dead man. I nearly died myself. There's absolutely no way I'm accepting whatever joke of a job this is. 140,000 base, plus benefits and overtime. 10 minutes later, I was signing the offer. Go ahead, hate me if you want, but never underestimate what you yourself wouldn't do under the weight of a 6-figure student debt. If you're going to be unhappy, no matter where you are, you might as well be unhappy and rich. It was only hours later, after my flight home, after I was safe in my bed on campus, and the whole interview felt like a distant nightmare, that I finally cracked open my new employee handbook. I found the section on the 1-minute, 47-second incident. Section 9A. It explained what Randall had, that I should count in my head, not freak out, and usually nothing would happen. There was some additional explanation too. If your engine does not immediately come to life after the waiting period has concluded, then close your eyes and hide. The things in the forest will eventually lose interest. Above all, remain in your vehicle. If you leave at any point during the hunting ceremony, they will know your scent. You will never rest again. Why are you doing this? That was the thing my girlfriend of 3 years asked me repeatedly in the days leading up to my departure. The start day for my new trucking gig drew closer. I'd be moving to a totally different state. I did just graduate. I do need a job. Trucking has nothing to do with your major. Stay here. To be fair, most jobs have nothing to do with English. That's sort of the issue. Day after day, though, Myra continued to ask why I was doing this. I could have gone with the easy answer, the money, which really had been why I'd signed my contract in the first place. But the closer my start date got, the more I was sure that wasn't the whole reason I was leaving. How did I put into words this growing feeling inside me that I couldn't stay, that I wasn't happy there, or anywhere really, and how it was slowly suffocating me? And while it wasn't her fault, she also wasn't the solution as much as she wished she could be, so I had to go. I had to. But yeah, I'm fairly sure what I actually did say was just money. Sue me. You can still call me, she said the night before my flight. We'll talk every day while you're driving, yeah? I don't know, I said. I think probably not. There's a whole section in the employee handbook about how I can only use the radio. So they won't know. How are we supposed to do long distance if we can't talk? I remembered the bloodied corpse of the other interviewee skewered to his hood. I remembered the scratch of my own face pressed to the pavement as things skittered around my rig. How could I explain why I had to follow the phone rule, too? I stayed silent. Her voice got soft. We're breaking up, aren't we? I think, I think we are. For a second, I thought Myra might slap me. She's not mean, but she's impulsive, the type of girl who has a midlife crisis every other Tuesday, and frequently shows up with a brand new life philosophy tattooed on her thigh. One of the things I loved about her. But it wasn't always easy to predict what drastic things she'd do to cope. Instead, she hugged me, kissed me on the cheek, and left. At the door to my apartment, she paused. Goodbye, Brendan. In the job preparation packet, my new trucking company was very clear on one thing: read the employee handbook. So I did what anybody would do in this situation. I skimmed it. I'm sure at this point, those of you who read my last post are clucking your tongues disapprovingly. Really, Brendan? One dead body wasn't enough? Didn't you already accidentally break a rule last time? But let me ask you this. What was the last job you worked where you read the entire employee handbook back to front? That's what I thought. The parts I did read had some weird stuff in them. There was your typical information, what to pack for overnighters, and general rig maintenance guidelines, but also some odder things. Sections on what to do if the moon forgot to show up on a night it was supposed to, or explanations on which gas stations were normal and which ones had rules to obey, like don't stare anybody in the eyes, not even if they're speaking directly at you. There was a whole page with a bullet list on which FM radio stations were safe and which might put you into a trance for hours or make you crave non-food substances. Never speed, read a sentence in Section 5.A. If you do, it may draw the attention of the Highway Patrol. They're not Highway Patrol. They will not give you a ticket. You do not want to find out what they will give you as punishment instead. Basically, I was around 90 to 95% sure I would die a morbidly gruesome death my first real time on Route 333. More of a passing interest than an actual fear, which probably just demonstrated how damaged my psyche was. I'm happy to report, however, my first haul went off without a hitch. The first section was redwood groves, followed by hours of desert pockmarked with run-down towns, and finally some twisting mountain canyons. I crashed in the sleeper after delivering my haul at an abandoned building. That's where they told me to leave it. I woke up early the next morning to finish the route and did so alive and well. My truck stopped for a minute 47 seconds at the same part as last time, but there was no additional visit from the things in the forest. Randall hadn't actually seemed overly concerned when I explained to him how I had in fact gotten out of the truck during the interview, so I chose to not be too worried for now. Back at the truck yard, I dangled my keys in front of Randall. He whistled. 14 hours there and back? That is simply unheard of. Can I ask you what I actually delivered? No, you may not. He smiled cheerily and plucked the keys for me. I was still having a hard time figuring out Randall. Either he was a passive-aggressive jerk or he simply had an odd sense of humor. Either way, he hadn't seemed too concerned when the other man in my interview got savagely murdered, so that probably tipped the scales towards jerk. My next few weeks went almost equally smooth. Still no incidents in the Redwood section. Randall and the other dispatchers started sending me on longer and longer trips down Route 333. They would last 3, sometimes 4 days at a time. I didn't mind. I was getting massive amounts of overtime, but I did get the odd sense the dispatchers were almost excited about the fact I was going so far. I knew there was a part in the employee handbook about how the road would expand over time. A drive that took me 4 hours might take another driver 8 or more. Eventually, there would be a breaking point, a rapid expansion where a section of the road that took you minutes would now take weeks. From tidbits of conversations with other drivers, I got the impression there were truckers who hadn't quit in time, who'd been stuck on Route 333 for years, trying to get back. Frankly, most days I didn't really care. For the first time in years, my racing thoughts were finally slowing. My chronic overthinking was fading away to a sense of pleasant numbness. Whatever happened, however this road worked, was the same to me. Before I'd started trucking, I'd been worried that the loneliness would get to me. Now, the only thing I worried about anymore was about how entirely fine I was being this alone. Something was happening to me, a slow evaporation. I'd stopped for fuel at a petro speed when I heard it. At first, I couldn't entirely place the voice, and I just continued filling up. Something nagged at the recesses of my mind, though, a thin thread yanking and yanking. Finally, I twisted to see who belonged to the voice across the parking lot. I gaped. It was Myra, my ex-girlfriend, talking animatedly with what looked like one of the Petro Speed workers. As I got closer, I could make out their conversation. "What do you mean there's no mechanics in the area?" Myra jabbed a finger at her car. "How am I supposed to keep driving in that thing?" "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the nearest town is hours away. You'll have to call a towing company." "I don't want to call a towing company. I want to find somebody here." "I understand that, ma'am, but—" "Myra?" I asked. She whirled, looking as if she was going to snap at me too, then realized who I was. Her hands flew to her mouth, then she sprinted at me and threw herself in my arms. I laughed. "This is insane. What are you doing here?" "Looking for you." "Looking for—" "Myra, you haven't even called me." "Yes, I did. I've called a dozen times the last few days and you never picked up. I got worried. I wanted to see you." I wouldn't have picked up. I was on the third day of a 4-day trip. I didn't even bring my phone anymore to avoid the temptation of using it. Something like this, her somehow tracking me down to the middle of nowhere, felt exactly like the sort of impulsive thing Myra would do. Entirely insane, but the exact reason I fell in love with her. "Amazing luck," she said. "If my car hadn't died, I wouldn't have stopped here. Can I ride with you?" We talked for hours. It was just like before. We laughed and sang along to the limited country songs we knew at ear-shattering volumes. After a few hours, she grabbed my hand and I didn't stop her. I thought I was fine with the loneliness, but having her here, physically with me, I knew I'd mind it more than I let myself believe. "I never thought you'd want to talk to me again," I told her. "At first, I didn't." She stroked my knuckle with her thumb. "I don't think I'll ever stop loving you." I felt amazing. No, better than amazing. I felt happy. I glowed the whole evening, all up until we stopped at a rest stop for the night and she slipped into the building for the bathroom. "Everything's good," I reported on my handheld radio as part of my nightly check-in. Yes, somehow this radio was capable of connecting back with dispatch. I'd given up wondering how. "You sound chipper," Randall said. "Crazy story, actually. I told him about running into Myra, about how I was giving her a lift back to civilization, and how good it was to see her." He got quiet. "You're not supposed to pick up hitchhikers," he said. "I didn't. She's not a hitchhiker. I know her." "Did she ask you for a ride?" "No, I offered her a ride. But I didn't, had I? I would have, but she'd gotten to asking first." A slow, deadly chill spread up my back. "Who are you talking to?" Myra climbed into the cab with PJs on. "Nobody. Nobody at all." She fell asleep instantly, cuddled up next to me. This was Myra of all people. I knew her. She wasn't a stranger. I hadn't broken any rules. Why couldn't I just be happy for once? I forced myself to close my eyes, steady my breaths, and drift asleep. I woke up hours later. It was a gradual wake-up. Something wet was on my face. My eyes didn't snap open. Instead, for some inexplicable reason, I cracked them open just a fraction, thin enough they still appeared closed. She was staring at me. In the early morning light, Myra watched me with an enormous grin across her face, fully awake. She leaned in and ran her tongue from my chin up to my forehead. "I love you," she whispered. "Do you need the bathroom?" I asked hours later. We were stopped at a rest stop a mere hour or two from the end of Route 333. The last few hours, the conversation had been tense. She hadn't wanted to get out to stretch her legs once. I'd pushed. She'd gotten annoyed. "I'm good." "You haven't gone all day. You didn't go yesterday either." She giggled like I'd told some joke. She reached out to my face and ran a single, sharpened nail along my cheek. "It's almost like you want to get rid of me." I swallowed and pretended to ignore the drip of blood from my chin. "Of course not." I took the keys with me when I went to fill up the tank. She pressed her face up against the glass the whole time, waving incessantly. When I climbed back in, she giggled. "Don't take so long," she said. "I missed you." We drove. She became increasingly cuddly. Her grip when she held my hand, it was tight, too tight. There would be bruises tomorrow. She started leaning across the center divide to kiss my cheek and rake her teeth against my neck. "Stop," I said. "No." I stopped 3 more times to stretch my legs. "You should too," I said each time, but she refused. She wouldn't leave. "Stop it," she growled the 4th time we stopped. Her face distorted into a grotesque mask, then softened back into a smile. "I'll miss you." "Myra," I took a breath, "there's actually something I need to ask you." "Yes?" "It's not something I can ask you in a truck, though." Her face scrunched in annoyance. Her breath grew harsh and gravelly. "These last 2 days have been amazing. They've made me realize how much I missed you and need to be with you. The thing I need to ask you, I have to kneel for it." A soft smile tugged at her lips. Finally, she relented. She followed me from the truck. As we walked to a clearing in the forest, her steps grew more erratic and random, more excited perhaps. The skin on her face looked less smooth and more like plastic, like something designed in a factory. "Close your eyes," I whispered and sunk my hand into my pocket showingly. She did. Then I bolted for the truck. It was seconds before she realized what was happening, and even longer before she started after me. By the time the thing, the not Myra, reached me, the doors were already locked. I was already rolling away. Her face was something entirely inhuman. Her eyes dripped like melted wax from her empty sockets, and her hair peeled off in clumps. "No!" she screeched. "I love you! Don't leave me!" But I did, for the 2nd time. When I returned to the truck yard, I said nothing of what had happened. Randall didn't either, though he seemed visibly surprised to see me. He simply accepted my keys with a wink. Jerk, I decided. Definitely a jerk. The first thing I did when I got in my car was make a phone call. The other person on the other end picked up after the 2nd ring. Neither of us spoke. We breathed into the receiver, waiting for the other to initiate. "Hi," I said. "Hi." How could I ever have forgotten what Myra's true voice sounded like? Nothing in her tone suggested she was anything but safe, something I already knew, but actually confirming it let me relax for hours. "Brendan," she said, "why are you calling?" "I don't entirely know." "Are you all right?" she asked. "I'm not sure." She was silent. I was too. "You should know. I know it doesn't matter, but I think you should know I'm with somebody new." "Okay." "That's it?" "I think so, yeah." Myra huffed out a laugh, though I'm entirely certain she thought none of this was funny. "Why did you do this to me?" she snapped. I opened my mouth, then closed it. "Nothing?" she asked when I didn't reply. "Really, Brendan? You left after 3 years, no warning, and you never even really told me why. I loved you, and you threw me away. Decent people don't do that. I get that you have your own stuff going on, but that's a terrible way to treat somebody." "It is," I sighed and leaned my head against the steering wheel. "Myra, I think there's something broken about me. Don't be dramatic." "I'm not. Something's always been broken about me, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know what it is. But I am sorry. That wasn't fair of me to leave like that. You deserve to hate me." A pause. I could never hate you, she whispered. We hung up, before either of us could start crying, I suspected. For a few minutes, sitting there after the call, I considered quitting. I should have been afraid of Route 333. After everything I'd seen on it, after the bodies and the creatures that weren't quite human, it would make sense for me to leave. Anybody in my situation would be considering the same. Anybody smarter than me probably would have quit. I couldn't, though. I was afraid of the road, of the things that prowled behind the trees and waited in empty gas station shower stalls. I was afraid of the things that perhaps knew my scent and the thing that slept next to me in bed. Of course I was. I was just afraid of the real world more. So I stayed. I kept driving. And one day, when the road expands past days long into weeks long, possibly even years long, I will keep driving. Okay, guys, I really should clarify a few things at this point. The first of which being that while it is true, I may not have immediately read the entire employee handbook before the incidents of my last post, I had read most of it. Chapter headings, section descriptions, general overview, etc. Even if I'd read the entire part about hitchhikers, it wouldn't have prevented the whole incident with not Myra. And plus, I'll remind you that I'm not actually dead yet, so I'm not entirely helpless. The main issue with the employee handbook is that it's vague. Sure, there are rules and guidelines, but I get the impression Randall and the rest of the dispatchers don't entirely know what's going on either. This road, Route 333, makes its own rules. It doesn't always care to inform us about them. Okay, and second thing. I have actually gone to therapy before. I'd prefer not to get into it much with a bunch of anonymous online Redditors, no offense, but it wasn't especially helpful. For some people I know, therapy makes things harder first before it makes them better, but for me, it sort of just made things harder, and harder, and harder. Something about the vulnerability of it. I've tried a few medications too, but I've heard some people are pretty resistant to them. I suspect that's me. Even so, thank you for all your concerns, for real. Now, on to something more related to Route 333 and the many ways I repeatedly almost get myself killed. Because, let's be real, that's why you're here, not to hear about my ever-degrading mental state. Mainly, I realize I haven't said much about the other truckers. I'm sure to nobody's surprise, I mainly avoided the other drivers the first few weeks at my job. Every few hours, I'd pass one of them on Route 333 and give a small wave. But apart from that, I was in no rush to make new friends, especially not ones in their 40s and 50s. If it weren't for the faceless man, I might have never gotten to know them at all. There's not much of a section in the employee handbook on the faceless man. The only mention is when it says, the faceless man has learned how to unlock doors from the inside. Like I said, vague. Ominous, too, though, so I made sure to close my windows and lock the doors every night before laying down in the cab sleeper. Generally, I'd leave the windows shut even if it was sweltering, but one night it got especially sweltering. There weren't many clouds in the sky. I'd already tossed and turned in my sweaty sheets for an hour before I decided to let in some air. Just a crack. I even wiggled my fingers in the open space to make sure that's all that could get through. When I tried to sleep this time, there was enough of a breeze to let me. The next time I woke, it was still night. The moon was covered by clouds, but enough light made it through to illuminate the interior of the cab. Clouds. I sat up. There was no reason to be afraid. I knew this. I hadn't broken any rules. The doors were locked and secured. Even so, I glanced first at the driver's side window and then the passenger. My entire existence jerked to a stop. It stared at me through the glass. At least that's what I assumed it was doing. The thing had no eyes, no ears, no hair, and no mouth. The only feature reminiscent of a living creature's were two snake-like slits in the middle of the face, a nose of some sort. It faced me. It smelled. I could audibly hear the inhale even through the door, and the slits widened to holes the size of chestnuts. Light from the truck stop caught on each individual hair, almost like teeth. "Hello?" I tried, but no sound came out. I forced my throat to clear and tried again. "Do you need something? Are you the faceless man?" Right, because of course the thing with no ears and no mouth is going to hear you and respond. And then I thought maybe the name Faceless Man is somehow offensive, so I immediately asked, unless you prefer to be called something different, because apparently I'd literally already forgotten this thing could not hear me. If you can't tell, I tend to overthink whilst in uncomfortable situations. By this point, I'd already experienced enough oddities of the road that I was content to just curl there in the corner and wait until the thing left. That's exactly what I would have done if the faceless man hadn't reached a hand with 7 fingers up and tapped the glass. Quick clarification. When I say fingers, that's probably precisely what you envision. Fingers. What I really mean is 7 bleach-white protrusions, each a meter long, with dozens of joints and gnarled nails curling from their tips. I watched in horror as each of the fingers felt along the glass, found the lip, then snaked inwards. "Nope," I told it. "That's not happening. You're not doing that." I scrambled for my pants, then decided it really wasn't worth it and clamored for the driver's seat in my boxers. The faceless man inhaled again and swiveled to follow my movement. "Out," I commanded and twisted the key. The truck roared to life. The ivory fingers felt around, sliding past the unlock button and heading directly for the inner handle. "One last chance," I warned, even though it was entirely clear by now the thing wasn't able to hear me. When it predictably continued to not be able to hear me, I did what anybody would do in this situation. I rolled up the window. They flattened. Each cylindrical finger compressed where the glass closed into them, and the thing outside shuddered in pain. It yanked at them, trying to escape, but unable. I gave it 2 more seconds, then cracked the window again. The faceless man yanked his fingers from my car, exhaled greenish globs of what I suspect was snot on my window, then skittered away. Needless to say, I got an early start that morning. While that whole incident did shake me up and made me demand a rig with internal AC, non-negotiable, it reminded me of something. The faceless man had tracked my movements by smelling me. Maybe that was just a coincidence. Probably smells were how it was drawn to any human. But there was already another subset of road dwellers who apparently knew my scent. Could the faceless man be somehow connected? The employee handbook said very little about the topic, and Randall hadn't seemed overly talkative with me when I'd asked him about the things in the forest. I approached a few coworkers instead. They explained that no, the faceless man probably wasn't connected to the things in the forest. They were confined to the forest. He was confined to cloudy nights. He was just a harmless past, basically like a raccoon, looking for somewhere to warm up. Although he would occasionally suffocate people by shoving his fingers down their throat, so maybe not entirely harmless. They also told me not to trust any energy brands I didn't recognize at gas stations and to avoid coffee at late-night diners. The coffee wasn't dangerous, it just was nasty. I started talking with the other drivers at the truck yard before and after hauls. We'd chat when we stopped for showers at the same time and radio greetings when we passed each other on the road. Slowly, I got to know some of them. Deidre was a divorced mom of 3. She hated she had to be away from her kids for such long stretches, but this job's pay was the only way she'd be able to send her oldest to college. Then there was Vikram. He immigrated with his family from India about 10 years ago. He tried taxiing in Chicago, but the pay was crap and the people were rude. He liked long hauling much better. Kreis was more of a short hauler. He'd been on Route 333 for almost 15 years, longer than anybody else. He started like me, with an extremely short drive time, and the road had taken its sweet time expanding for him. He mainly did short trips now, to be safe, 1 or 2 day hauls. That's how long it took him to get out of the Redwood section to the first turnaround point, from my interview, about 10x slower than me still. Even so, he could still cover ground quicker than some of the others. "I'll be done in a year or 2, he confided in me once over breakfast at a diner. They pay me more than anybody, but takes me longer to get anything done. Don't want to risk getting lane locked. That's what we call it, lane locked. Usually, Route 333 expands at an even pace, but eventually, without warning, it will one day explode in length. What took hours to drive the previous day might take weeks or even years now. There's signs to watch out for. Less stars in the sky than usual, rest stop attendants getting colder to you, expansion at an increasing pace. But it's impossible to predict the exact moment lane locking happens. There's always a risk of getting taken unawares. It's like a fever breaking, Deidre explained to me. We're the virus. It takes a minute for the highway to get immune to us, but once it does, it happens all at once. There's a small stretch far out into the desert where it's common to see a neon orange flatbed heading the direction of the real world. Sometimes it's missing. It slips into pockets of the road the rest of us luckily haven't accessed yet, but always, eventually, you see the flatbed again. Same area, still driving. How long has he been going now? I asked Chris one morning. 6, maybe 7 years? Al's a good guy. We'll pull over and talk occasionally. His time came quicker than most. How much ground has Al covered? Chris exhaled his mouth and shook his head. To you, maybe a few miles. He'll never make it back, not in 100 years. But he has a family, though. He refuses to quit. Some do, though. Some accept they're stuck, that it's not worth years of their life trying to get out, and find a new sort of life on Route 333. People like Tiff. The first time I met Tiff, I was getting coffee at 3 in the morning at the Wayside Diner. It's true, the coffee at late-night diners on Route 333 is truly, utterly disgusting. But I was desperate for any sort of caffeine, however crappy. I was only a few hours from the truck yard terminal, and if possible, I tried not to sleep on the highway more than absolutely necessary. Call me high maintenance, but I'm still not a fan of waking up to see Mr. Nose sniffing longingly at me. A middle-aged waitress delivered my coffee and waited there as I sipped it. What the? I looked up at her. This is actually palatable. Not exactly a compliment, but I'll take it. The woman slid in the booth across from me. You must be the new one. Brendan, right? Yeah? I wasn't used to people on Route 333 knowing who I was, or really even acknowledging me. It was still unclear from the handbook and my interactions with them if they were actual people or just sort of there. This woman seemed different, though. I'm Tiff, former employee turned waitress. I've heard of you, the others, they mention you. Still remember me, do they? Glad to hear I'm not entirely forgotten. Almost never visit me anymore. You work here? She shrugged. When I want. Staffing lets me fill in, not so sure if they're letting me as much as I tell them I work here and they believe me. Doesn't pay anything, but it's not like I need money anymore. Just like chatting. I much prefer real people, though. She clasped her hands and muscles flexed along her fully tattooed arms. Tiff was exactly the type of tough woman you'd imagine would become a trucker. Well, that mixed with the sort of desperate, lonely friendliness only found at an old folks' home. Tell me, she said, what was your first reaction when you realized Route 333 wasn't a normal road? I always ask that. I don't think I've ever screamed at an interviewer before. She laughed. And after you started working? It was a bit weird, I guess. I don't know, I just sort of accepted it. A bit weird? She eyed me, then reached for my cup and took a swig. You seem like somebody going through something. True enough. We talked for hours that night. She grabbed us some pie from the counter and she asked about my life and talked about hers. She'd been offered a position on Route 333 for years before she actually accepted. She'd heard the rumors. She knew the sort of dangers it offered. When she finally took a position, it was only because her daughter got a brain tumor. Treatment was expensive. Her daughter didn't survive. But after that, Tiff kept hauling to stave off the loneliness. I understood. She told me that, no, I didn't actually, seeing how I was a 20-odd-something puppy boy, but that I probably had my own similar thing I did understand that was close enough, so she wasn't offended. By the time we called it quits, the sun was already rising. I don't remember everything we talked about, but I do remember myself standing up, patting her shoulder, and saying, "I'll talk to Randall. We'll find some way for you to get out of here." Her face went dark. "You shouldn't have said that. Not where the road can hear you." I slept a few hours, then got up around noon. Before I left, I decided to take a shower. The water in the personal shower room was cold. I waited a few minutes for it to heat up, but when it didn't, I decided that realistically, there were people dying from parasites in other countries, and a cold shower likely wouldn't result in a grueling end. It did still suck, though. I finished that thing in a minute flat, then twisted the faucets off. The water didn't stop. I tried twisting it the other way. The water only got stronger. And the drain in the floor, it had stopped working. Freezing water was building up in a puddle. Soon it overflowed the lip of the shower and onto the tile. I sighed, dressed and went for the door. My sandals slapped all the way there. It was locked. I flipped the lock back and forth, but any way I attempted, the door wouldn't budge. I pounded at it until the cold touch of water licked my ankles. It was around then that I realized I was in trouble. "Hey!" I screamed repeatedly, but nobody seemed to hear me. The water was at my knees now. How was it coming so fast? I waded back to the shower, tried the handle again, then did my first truly stupid thing of this incident. You all know by now I'm bound to do something stupid eventually. I bound my towel around the shower head to stop the flow, which didn't work a bit. Then I proceeded to slip, trip, and yank the towel with me. The shower head tore off. The rate of water doubled. It was at my shoulders now. The water started pumping out brown and sludgy. It was too murky to see through, and my feet, things began to brush against them. Just my clothes, I told myself, but since when did my clothes have scales? I pounded at the door. I stood on the handle to keep my face above the water. There had to be some way out. I couldn't die like this. There was only a foot of breathable air now, then 6 inches, then 1. I gasped a final breath as the slimy, scaled things wrapped around my ankles and jerked me down. I flailed to escape, but where would I go? There was no more air. The entire room was filled with glacier water. My vision started dimming. I felt my throat convulsing, begging me to breathe. I couldn't resist anymore. The door flew open. Hundreds of gallons of water sloshed out of the bathing room. It slammed me against the wall, but I gasped and struggled to my feet. When I stood, the hallway was dry. The shower room was dry. My dirty clothes were in a heap on the bench where I'd left them. Totally, you guessed it, dry. The only thing that was sopping wet was me. Tiff walked into the hallway a few seconds later with a garbage bag. She glanced from me and my sopping clothes to the open door of the shower room, then back to me. "You told me you shouldn't have said that." "What just happened?" I demanded, followed by a fountain of colorful words. "A threat. The road doesn't like to give up things it's claimed for its own. Don't try to help me escape, Brendan." With that, she shook her head, stepped over the puddle at my feet, and carried the trash down the hallway. It took me some time to change my clothes, dry off, and even more time to calm down. Once I had, I was finally able to think. The way Tiff had told me not to help her was calm, resigned. She'd given up years ago. She'd accepted this truck stop and its miniature diner was her life now, because the only alternative was something worse. The road had claimed her. It wanted her to stay, and it would hurt anyone who tried to take her. Except it couldn't hurt me. That realization, that shining understanding, more golden than any moment of happiness, filled me with hope. Route 333 couldn't hurt me because I had nothing I cared about. It could kill me, but so what? Why should that bother me? My life didn't matter to me, which meant I could defy the road all I wanted. Tiff might have given up, but I hadn't. I was going to get her out or die trying. I'd finally found something I hadn't in years. As you might remember, I ended my last post with a delightfully heroic announcement. I was going to save Tiff, defy the road, and risk my very life to do so. As befits the commencement of any noble quest, I started my journey in the same way as any fearless hero. I tried to get somebody else to do the work for me. Randall, I began, I get the impression you're about to say something I won't like. We need to rescue the stranded truckers. Thought so. There has to be something we can do to get them out. Tiff doesn't even have a vehicle anymore. She says her old one broke down, but maybe we can haul her a car. We're not in the business of handing free cars to non-employees. I'll buy it, I said. Maybe she can share with Al, the other driver stuck on Route 333, the one still driving. This isn't funny. Of course it isn't funny. Randall slammed his hands on the desk and shot to his feet. I find nothing humorous in you messing with things you have no idea about. Maybe if you answered more of my questions, I would have more of an idea. You don't get to hand us an obscure employee handbook, then expect us to be good little soldier boys who follow your every order without ever giving us any explanations at all? Yes, actually, I do get to expect that. That's what the extremely generous salary is for. Oh, shove off. Money doesn't let you treat us like crap. Oh. I think it was his smirk that did it. Randall was fuming as much as me, but he still managed a satisfied smile as if to say, "You're stuck, you know it, you won't leave." And he was right. Nowhere else paid this well, not for a college grad. I'd moved my whole life to California. I absolutely couldn't go back now. But that smirk. Find a new driver. I stormed out of the office. For any of you who fantasized about doing the exact same thing at your current job, I can assure you it feels every bit as good as you imagined and more. I kept expecting the horror of what I'd done to hit, but it didn't. Instead, I seethed on my drive home. I seethed as I heated up dinner in the microwave, and I seethed as I went to bed. It had been so long since I cared about anything that I forgot how strong it could feel. I woke up at 1 a.m. to a screaming cell phone. Those of you who've read this far have probably noticed my attempts at sleep often get interrupted. Faceless men watching me, exes licking my face, the likes. If you're bored of this repeated occurrence, I'd just like to add my signature to that ballot. At what age did 8 hours of healthy sleep become such a wildly unrealistic request? I was so groggy, I didn't even bother to check the caller ID before picking up. Big mistake. "We need you to come in, now," Randall said. "It's the middle of the night. This is an emergency. I cussed him out. If you'll remember, I quit less than 10 hours ago. You're not still going on about that, are you? You didn't quit, you just stormed out. Look, I apologize for whatever it is that made you so ticked earlier, all right? We good? Now stop throwing a fit and get yourself to the terminal." "I'm not coming in." I hung up on him mid-sentence. If I weren't so tired, that probably would have felt almost as phenomenal as walking out, at least until the point that Randall called again. I declined. He called again. I declined. He called, I kid you not, 12 more times. 12! Probably I should have blocked him at that point, but I still wasn't thinking straight. The 13th time, I finally picked back up. "Stop! Please." Randall's tone was different now. He'd lost his usual superior edge. There was only desperation. "Brendan, this isn't a game. Come in tonight, right now, and I'll include a $10,000 bonus on your next paycheck." My finger hovered over the hang up button. Not a bonus, a yearly raise. That's not how promotions work here. It wouldn't be a promotion. You would be rehiring me. I already quit, remember? Randall cussed me out. It felt good to hear him so undeniably lose his cool. "Fine, you win. You'll get your rehiring bonus. Just come in." His tone lowered. "Okay, but we're not really redoing the paperwork for you to be fired and rehired. That's just excessive." It is. Did I feel like a sellout? A little. But at least Randall was pissed. My grand defiance for authority had lasted barely 8 hours, and I now knew my ego was lasted just a scant 10 grand. More than I thought, actually. Student loans really are no joke. As soon as I reached the truck yard, Randall handed me a cup of coffee and a set of keys. "The trailer's already hooked up. You don't even need to take it far tonight. Just get it onto Route 333, and then you can sleep for a few hours, if you want." "Where am I going?" Randall exhaled. He handed me a map, something he'd never done before. I hadn't even known maps of Route 333 existed, and he showed me where I was headed. But that's at least 5 days from here. That's a 10-day haul. I only brought one set of clothes. I threw some of mine in the cab. When I tried to interrupt, he held up his hand. And yes, it's one with AC. There was that at least. What's in the trailer? I asked. He didn't even respond, just raised an eyebrow, back to his usual condescending self. That was fair, I supposed. I had agreed to take the job again, and I knew the rules. No peeking. Obviously, I'd asked the other drivers about what we were hauling. They were more than happy to offer up knowledge, like best pullouts for a quick nap, what diners fried the best bacon, and how to avoid running into the things with zippers on their stomachs. Anytime I tried asking about our cargo, though, the mood changed. Their faces darkened. They sobered. Deidre confided in me once, sometimes not knowing a secret can drive you mad, but sometimes it's knowing the secret that does it. In this job, you have to figure out which it is. I didn't trust that management always had our best interests in mind, but I did trust the other drivers. I gave up asking what we were hauling. I let myself stop wondering. If I could live with not knowing, that probably meant it was the latter of Deidre's actions. Finding out would be the worse an alternative. That night, though, driving through massive redwoods beneath a starry sky, I wasn't sure. The not knowing, the wondering, it was going to kill me. I was so distracted, it took me almost by surprise when my rig sputtered, slowed, then stopped. By now, I knew to expect this. It happened every trip down Route 333. The exact location would vary, but it always happened in the Redwoods section. Per usual, I clicked start on the stopwatch I'd begun carrying. Somewhere around a minute 55, I stopped it. There was no point in keeping track anymore. I already knew I'd been stalled for too long. Control your breath, don't panic, close your eyes, hide. This hadn't happened since my interview, but I'd always known this was a possibility. The other drivers talked about multiple minute timeouts happening to them, and none of them had ever gotten hurt. All I had to do was crouch in between my seat and the sleeper bed, shut my eyes, and ignore the real fact that these things had my scent. The footsteps began. They scurried around my rig. Occasionally, things would tap or knock on the metal. One thing yanked at the door handles. They stayed shut. At one point, the entire truck shuddered, as if dozen bodies were slamming themselves against one side in an attempt to tip it. The truck stayed put. It would get worse, I knew. That's what had happened the first time. The footsteps had increased steadily until I could hear nothing else, and then the engine had started. Except the footsteps didn't get worse. Instead, the scurrying calmed down. The forest dwellers were still out there. I could hear the pitter of feet, but it was calmer, less frantic. Was this some sort of trick? Did they think I couldn't hear them and would open my eyes? A moment later, I knew that theory was wrong. They weren't trying to hide. They were trying to quiet down enough to speak with me. Give it to us. The voice wasn't a voice exactly. It was the rustle of leaves, the snap of branches underfoot, and the tinkle of wind chimes, all somehow combined in a way that formed words. I held my breath. We smell you, he who dwells on stone. Your odor has presented itself here once before in our domain. We demand an audience. I kept still. Was there anything in the employee handbook about actually speaking with them? I don't think so, but maybe I'd missed it. Maybe you should really read the whole thing, Brendan. The strange not voice seemed to sigh. Speak with us, or we will slash your tires. A pretty convincing argument, in my opinion. What is it? I asked. That is not an answer one life force may give another. So, you don't know. Of course we know, the thing said defensively. Really? Because it sounds like you're bluffing right now. We know. The thing calmed itself. Relinquish your load and we will allow passage to all of your kind for the next generation. I remembered the man skewered on his hood. These things weren't bluffing. They could kill us, and easily. How many people would I save over a generation if I agreed? And yet, I didn't know what was in my cargo, but I did know these things killed humans for merely looking at them. If they wanted my haul, it couldn't be for anything good. So I did the only thing I could think of. I stalled. How about a clue, though? I asked. Surely you can give me a clue of what I'm hauling. It couldn't, it informed me, so I pushed. The thing got more and more frustrated. I got more and more anxious. The footsteps grew restless again. They started circling my truck, looking for a way in. One of them, I got the impression it was the one speaking to me, scratched at the door. It slammed against the window, the sound of cracking glass. "You are merely attempting to waste our time," the forest thing accused. "That is the plan, yes." It slammed the glass again, more cracking. Bad, real bad. I could practically sense the creature drawing back, preparing for a third and final strike, about to break in. The engine roared alive. I whooped and scrambled for the front. Just before I uncovered my eyes, though, I realized the footsteps were still there, circling my truck. They hadn't left. I didn't consider. I didn't allow myself time to think up a secondary plan. I just leapt into my seat, threw the car in drive, and slammed my foot on the gas, all without looking. The truck lurched forward. I forced my eyes to stay closed for 2, 4, 6 seconds before letting them spring open. A turn was coming up. I jerked the wheel to the left, but not in time to avoid the low-hanging branches that battered against my front windshield. I retook control, never slowing once, and never glancing in the rear view. I'd escaped. It was only a couple hours later, when I was well into the desert and far enough to feel comfortable, that I finally pulled to the side of the road to survey the damage. The driver window had splinters running through it. There were dents along the skirt of the freight carrier, but it was otherwise intact. I circled to the back to make sure everything was still locked and secure. It was. "Everything's fine. Get some sleep. You're fine." And then, as often happens just after the movie protagonist says, "It's all good, guys," I was immediately disabused of my delusions of safety. Something was crying. I pressed my ear to the metal of the freight. Sure enough, inside the container, faint but audible, was a little girl's sobs. "Hello?" I asked. "Do you need help?" The crying cut off. I waited another 10 minutes with my ears pressed to the container, but the crying never started again. The thing stayed silent. It would have been easy. For the sake of my sanity, I could have chalked it up to imagination. I was sleep-deprived and in shock, and of course I'd heard crying. It was my own inner child acting out from revulsion at this entire stressful situation. That's what it was. But it wasn't. I'd learned something, though what I now knew I wasn't totally sure. Was the thing in the cargo bay a person? A creature? A child? Sometimes not knowing a secret can drive you mad. Sometimes knowing the secret is worse. What's in the trailer? Through the radio, Randall sighed. In case anybody is unfamiliar with the mechanics of the handheld radio, you have to actually be pushing the transmit button for your voice to go through, which meant Randall was being a passive-aggressive crybaby who intentionally decided for me to hear his sigh of annoyance. Sometimes managers are just the worst. I stood just outside my truck where I'd pulled over on the side of the highway to check my vehicle for damage. For those who don't remember from my last post, the things in the forest attacked me to try and get whatever was in the trailer. It was still dark outside. "We literally just had this conversation," he said, "like 3 hours ago." "That was before I heard something inside the cargo. You tell me what's in there right now, or I turn around and come back." "That eager to visit the forest again, huh?" "Hang on," I said. "How do you know about my encounter?" The other end of the radio fell silent. "You set me up," I said. "You knew they were going to go after me with this thing in the trunk. You were trying to kill me off." "Don't be irrational. That's not what happened. You—" "Don't lie to me," I screamed, then immediately realized he couldn't hear me because, oh right, these are still radios, one at a time. Pushing my transmit button while he was pushing his was just preventing me from hearing him, which made me even more angry, and how dare the radio betray me too? Which only proved that yes, I indeed was being irrational, even if it was justified. I calmed and lifted my finger. "Safe as long as you followed the rules," he continued, oblivious to my outburst. "You did follow the rules, right? What am I saying? You're alive, so of course you did. Look, road dwellers just get more excited when there's live cargo, that's all. As long as you're cautious the rest of the trip, you'll be fine. But you knew I could die. We would never put you in real danger. I'm not worried for your safety, Brendan. You shouldn't be either. I wasn't, I realized. Sure, in the moment I felt fear just like anybody else, but afterwards, in the calm, I was never worried for my safety. It didn't matter what happened to me. My fury was less about the prospect of dying and more about the injustice of being set up. Something's crying in it. It sounds like a little girl. Well, it isn't. Then tell me what it is. Stop asking. You know that isn't something I'll do. You haven't slept yet, Brendan. I haven't either. Go put your head on a pillow and let's talk when we're both more calm, yeah? I told him exactly where he could stick his head. You aren't as valuable as you think, he growled at me. If you continue in such an unprofessional manner, we really will find a replacement. I suspected I was exactly as valuable as I thought I was. Who else would take this job? Who else could drive the highway as fast as me? And unprofessional? That was rich coming from the guy who demanded I come in at 1 a.m. and shrugged off the suggestion that we help save the lives of his former employees. I was gearing up to explain all of this, you can bet in less than professional words, when a wave of fatigue hit me. I really hadn't gotten any sleep. The sun would be up in a few hours, and my body was experiencing the adrenaline-exhausted version of a hangover. Fine, I told Randall. We argue when I wake. You'll feel better. He was right. After sleeping, I did feel better. And while that should have only annoyed me further, it was difficult to feel so since I now felt infuriatingly great. So great, in fact, I didn't radio Randall back. As much as I loathed him that morning, neither he nor anyone else at dispatch was ever going to answer my questions. That much was obvious even before he'd straight up admitted it. It was also obvious I wasn't really going to go back until I'd unloaded my current haul. So what was the point? Instead, I headed inside the truck stop to grab a cup of the only decent coffee on Route 333. You're all right then, Tiff told me in the mini diner. Why wouldn't I be? The faceless man was prodding your rig for hours last night. I had a broom ready in case he tried to break anything. I've never seen him stay in one place like that. A chill crept through me. I never saw him. He wasn't at the windows. He was at the back of the freight. Looked like he was trying to get inside. They get more excited when there's live cargo. That's what Randall had said. I sipped at my coffee. Hey, Tiff, I started. How could I phrase this? Have you ever figured out, have you ever wondered, what's up with the other people on the road, the non-truckers, like the ones who work here, like if they're real or not? I forget your generation uses so many filler words. She considered my question. There's different types of real, I suppose. We're one type, they're another. A statement which, while sounding wise and sage, didn't actually help me understand anything. Well. Tiff packed me food for a few days, and I headed outside. Back at my rig, I slipped a pancake under the slit in the trailer door. Something snatched it from the inside. Can you hear me? I whispered. No response. Do you need help? Nothing except the near imperceptible shudder of the back door, almost as if something on the other side was pressing a hand to it, waiting to see what I'd decide. It was after about 6 hours of driving that I realized with dawning, crippling horror of my irreversible mistake. I'd forgotten a battery pack. Let me explain. As you all probably remember, it's prohibited to use phones on Route 333, even if you're not calling with them. Why exactly? Don't know, but it is, and I wasn't about to break any rules unnecessarily. Instead, I'd gotten into the habit of downloading content onto my old iPod Nano, which apparently qualified as a different category. I checked with management. It's fine as long as I leave it in airplane mode. I also brought a battery pack to recharge the iPod with, since the outlets in the trucks didn't always work, such as my current truck, which meant, you guessed it, I was now stuck on a 10-day drive without any podcasts, books, or self-chosen music. And while I did understand on a deeply personal level that there were indeed worse tragedies than lack of entertainment, this did still qualify as a tragedy. I'd stayed away from the radio before that point. A few of the stations were in fact dangerous. They'd put you in a trance or whisper secrets you wished you could unhear, but overall they were safe. The other truckers didn't seem to fear them too much. Logically, I knew the radio was overall safe, but I'd still never been desperate enough to take the risk. Until my iPod died, that is. I flipped past a few country stations. Not my thing. Soon, though, I discovered something odd, a K-pop channel. It had probably been a few years since I'd actually listened to a car radio, but I couldn't ever remember Korean music playing on it, especially not out in the middle of nowhere like this. And the song that was playing, I didn't recognize it. I know K-pop. Stereotype me however you wish, but yes, I'm one of those white guys that watches anime and watches K-dramas and listens to Korean boy bands. K-pop Demon Hunter, pretty good. This song, though, not a clue. I listened for a while more. The channel was 96.2. That wasn't one of the stations I'd been warned against, was it? None of the music that came on was stuff I'd heard. They sounded like the groups I listened to, but songs I was positive didn't exist. Eventually, some of them started repeating, not in a loop like a playlist, just in the way popular songs replay every hour on the radio. And you know what? I started getting into it. Besides the pay, the perks of Route 333 had been few and far between, but this was one I could get used to. An entire playlist of music I loved that didn't exist in the real world? Sign me up. Maybe next time I'd bring a tape recorder and post the stuff online. I even started singing along. Time flew by. I didn't notice the flashing blue and white lights until the sirens came on. Randall? Nobody responded. The police car pulled in behind me. The lights flicked off. Randall? I tried again. Sorry, came a voice from the handheld. A woman, Gloria, I believe. I didn't interact with her as much. Randall's actually not. Oh, he left a note. It says, tell Brandon I'm off shift. If he wants to continue arguing, tell him one of the following responses. She pauses. The rest is quite rude, to be honest. I'm not trying to argue, I said. I just got pulled over. Do you have a flat? No, as in a cop pulled me over. There was silence. The silence of a doctor deciding how to word that. It's terminal, there's nothing I can do. How bad were you speeding? Gloria asked. That can make a big difference. Not at all. I was on cruise. I've read that section in the employee handbook. You haven't read all the employee handbook yet? Look, the important thing is he pulled me over. What do I do? A car door slammed. The highway patrol officer approached. The reason makes a difference, Gloria pushed. Yeah, I get that, but I don't know. I paused. My cargo. That's gotta be why. I'm the one on the long haul trip with the special cargo. A longer silence. Let me call Randall. The radio went dead. A knock sounded on my door. My heart pittered in my chest. The employee handbook was pretty clear about this particular subject. Don't get pulled over, don't speed or do anything that might draw the highway patrol, because there wasn't much you could do once you had. I didn't do anything, I assured myself. This isn't my fault. Not really. Then again, it wasn't really Tiff's fault she'd gotten lane locked. Sir, a husky voice said from outside. I held my breath and popped the door. He had a tag and a uniform. He rested a hand on his hip. The mustached man was just like every other officer that had ever pulled me over, save one singular difference. His head was bent entirely back. It was as if someone with impossible strength had grabbed his hair and yanked backwards and down. The neck was snapped and contorted. An empty tube jutted up from a break in the twisted skin, his throat. His entire face was upside down, and he stood backwards to face me. Hello? I said. Do you mind telling me what's in your trailer? A funny story, not actually sure. Please, remove yourself from the vehicle and open the back of the truck. Sorry, why did you pull me over? The officer sighed as if, kids these days, a puff of red mist spurted from his severed throat blowhole. Sir, you are speaking to an officer of the law. I will be investigating your vehicle. You will extricate yourself this instant or face the full wrath of the law. It was like a child pretending at the lines, a real police might say. That thought calmed me. Play acting. Fine, two could dance to this tune. Your warrant? I asked. As an officer of the law, you're clearly well aware you need one to search private property. Yes, that's correct. I do know that. I'll retrieve mine now. He walked backwards towards his stalling car, by which I mean he walked forwards with his upside-down eyes blinking at me. Hello, I called into my handheld. Could really use some advice right now. Nothing. If not, I'm planning to try and outrun him. Brendan, do not try to outdrive Highway Patrol. I repeat, do not attempt a chase. You will lose. Gloria's voice came through strong and clear. Finally. Before I could respond, she continued. I spoke to Randall. He said, again, we none of us love the idea, but he said if you really weren't speeding, there is one thing you could try. Yeah? I said. She sounded almost embarrassed as she explained. Randall had suggested a last-ditch attempt at escape, something that had only worked a few times, annoying the officer until he left. If you really had done nothing to get pulled over, the officer might give up if he got frustrated enough, as long as he had no legal grounds to detain you, or, worse, ticket you. I didn't bother asking what ticketing actually meant. Okay, and how am I supposed to annoy the officer? In my side window, I could see the cup ruffling around in the passenger of his cruiser. Randall says, again, we don't like this idea, but it's worked once before. You can try videotaping him with your phone. Cops hate that. The fear pulsing through me abated. The pounding distress settled. A cold understanding took over. Hey, Gloria, I said. Put Randall through to me. I imagined a disagreement, a small debate. Eventually, though, his voice came through muffled and tinny. She must be holding her phone to the handheld. Brendan, he said, answer honestly this time. Did you know this haul might kill me? I did. Is there a chance I survive if I use my phone? As soon as the cop is gone, drive like there's no tomorrow. That wasn't my question. I asked if there's a chance I survive. There is. And if I refuse this plan? I asked. Don't. His voice was barely audible. I'm sorry. I really am sorry we put you in this position, but you cannot let Highway Patrol get a hold of your cargo. None of the sentient road dwellers can't. That isn't an option. Too much is at stake. This is bigger than you. I nodded. If I risk breaking this rule, I have one condition. It isn't negotiable. It's a yes or no. I will only do this if you agree. Got that? It's that when I get back, you will explain to me what Route 333 is. You will tell me what I'm hauling and why it's so important. I took a breath without letting go of the transmit button. No arguing. Yes or no? A pause. Yes. There was a knock on the door. The officer was back. I set the radio down, then carefully, resigned, pulled my phone from the passenger cubby and powered it on. I could explain in detail what happened next. It would be the natural thing to do, to describe how I recorded our conversation like a pestilential YouTuber until the bent-necked officer exploded and stormed away. I won't do that. To me, the whole thing was a dream. It worked. Of course it did. Randall knew it would, more than he could let on, but none of that mattered. I may have survived Highway Patrol. But I wouldn't survive this next part. I watched as the black and white cruiser pulled in front of me and screamed down the highway. Smaller, smaller, gone. How does the officer see out his windshield? I wondered distantly. I set my phone in the drink holder without bothering to power it off. What I did no longer mattered. I waited. 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 A line of clouds appeared over the horizon line, dark and hostile. They rolled in at an unnatural speed. Outside no windows, the wind picked up. Dust devils rose up across the desert. My end was here. Randall never would have agreed to my one condition if he thought I'd survive. I knew almost nothing about him, but I knew that much. That was the only reason I'd made our deal, to see his response. Never, for any reason, would he or the rest of management tell me the truth about the road. He needed me to avoid highway patrol. He couldn't allow any of the living things on Route 333 to get to my cargo. But whatever was coming for me now was in some sort of different category. It wasn't alive. It was deadly, though. Enough he knew he wouldn't have to uphold his end of our bargain. I inhaled. I exhaled. Clouds rushed in above me, and thick drops of rust-colored liquid slid down my windshield. Blood. The end. Even now, I wasn't nervous. Surprise, surprise. I'm alive. That shouldn't come as much of a shock. How could I have posted my last entry if I died? But I assure you, sitting in the driver's seat, watching highway patrols screech away and the deadly dark clouds roll in, I was entirely sure I was going to die. Randall seemed to think so. Brownish red drops pattered against my windshield. They rolled down the hood and dripped from the side mirrors. The drizzle soon turned into a shower, which soon turned into a downpour. Blood rain. That's the term I wish I could use, that it had stayed a simple deluge and then passed on overhead. Instead, it got worse. The wind picked up. My rig rocked side to side. A red bolt of lightning struck a faraway mountaintop. The weather transformed from a blood rain into the thing it truly was, a meat storm. Chunks of something splattered against the windows. They exploded gore in every direction. Whole fingernails spattered the ground with the sound of hail. Loose, human-looking veins rained across the highway. I didn't bother with wipers. There was no surviving this, though I did try turning off the circulating air. Too late. By the time you smell manure on a road trip, it's always too late to close the windows. The stench of rotting flesh already filled my cab. It was the most terrible, gory thing I'd ever seen. I should have asked, who? What people had this gore been taken from? How could Route 333 possibly have caused so much death? I didn't ask this, though. Instead, I passively watched the disaster unfold, oddly at peace. Through the roar of the storm, I could make out something wailing through the back wall. The thing in the freight carrier was sobbing. This was it. I'd taken this job on Route 333 to flee my old life, but you can't run from one thing without running towards another. This was the thing I'd been hurtling towards. It would be easy, too. So easy to just sit there, recline back, and wait. My promise to help Tiff no longer mattered. My passion from the last few days flushed out of me as quickly as it had come, because in the end, this was the thing I truly wanted. An out. The end. A release. I didn't just accept it, I craved it. Across the empty desert, larger body parts rained down. Legs, severed ears, fist-sized gelatinous globs I assumed were organs that burst on impact like cans of soup. Something slammed against my windshield, a rotting arm with each finger severed at the knuckle. It tumbled away, but too late. Already cracks spiderwebbed out from the point of impact to match my side window. Any second now. And then another truck appeared through the storm. The tempest bore down. The other vehicle flickered between visible and hidden through sheets of blood rain. Where had it come from? There hadn't been anybody else. The weather had turned so quickly that I should have seen them beforehand in the distance. I watched as their rig slowed to a stop just a short stretch of road away. The driver's side door flew open and a figure threw themselves out into the storm. What happened next occurred in quick succession. There was a pop. The cab in front of their rig crumpled inwards like someone squeezing an empty soda can. Their shriveled hood burst into flames, but was put out by the rain. The enormous freight carrier collapsed inwards in much the same way, going from 3D to 2D in a millisecond. The entire vehicle groaned, teared, then toppled to the side. Holy! A pounding on my window. It took me a beat to register what was happening. The other driver. The person. I unrolled my window. A nightmarish and trail-laden person looked up at me. I couldn't even tell the gender. "What are you doing?" they screamed through the wind. "What about you?" "What about me?" "Don't you want a ride?" "I'd love a ride, but I'm not asking for one, am I?" Was this a vampire and a threshold situation? Why were they acting so odd? Despite the storm and the crumpled truck and the intestines raining from the sky, I experienced a jolt of fear. Was this the real way I died from using my phone? Had the road set up this whole elaborate situation to get me to let in this stranger? I hovered my hand over the gear shift. This was like Myra all over again. This person looked harmless, but they would kill me or eat me or any number of terrible things if I opened the door. Wasn't that one of the first rules? Never pick up hitchhikers. It clicked. "Get in!" I screamed and threw open my door. Blood and entrails splattered me. The trucker clambered up the side, scrambled over me, and collapsed in the passenger seat. "Took you long enough," she spat. I now realized, she wasn't a hitchhiker. She'd waited for me to offer a ride before coming in so I would know she could trust me. Maybe this was still a trick of Route 333, but I got the sense there were some rules even it couldn't break. She panted and clutched her chest, but when I just sat there, she pounded the dashboard. "Go, you idiot!" I did. We peeled out and careened the way she'd come. "Should be lessening," she said after a minute. "It already got my rig. It should be appeased." The girl spotted my phone in the cup holder. "Oh my gosh, you haven't gotten rid of this yet?" She unrolled the window and flicked it into the storm. "Hey, that's my—" But I had good enough sense to shut up. "Really, Brendan," I chided myself. "Priorities." We drove. Within minutes, the storm had lessened. Hefty liver lures lightened to spleens and eyeballs. Eventually, everything solid stopped falling. The rust-colored rain diluted till it was clear, pure water. Maybe by the time we stopped, my truck would be semi-clean. The inside, however, would not be. In the passenger seat, the girl dripped with blood. Sinuous intestinal bits dangled from her chin. A puddle of what looked like stomach bile pooled at her feet from a fleshy pouch that got tangled in her hair, and warm, rotting carcass filled the air. She spat repeatedly. "It's in my mouth. Ugh!" "Do you want a towel? There should be one." She tore the top sheet from my sleeper bed. I bit my tongue. She'd just been through something traumatic. She deserved to do whatever She ripped off the rest of the blankets. "Okay," I said. "I seriously just offered you a—" "What kind of idiot uses their phone?" Uh, you owe me a truck, by the way. You're lucky I was there to take the fallout for your stupid decisions." "Well, you're lucky I was there to pick you up." "You would be fine if you hadn't been there. Again, you were on the phone." "There wasn't any other option. It was the only way to get rid of the cops." "You were speeding too?" I forced myself to take 3 breaths. Why were we arguing? Here we are, strangers covered in entrails, almost having died in the worst possible way imaginable, and already arguing about who to blame? For the record, my vote's on Randall. I wasn't even totally sure we were out of the danger zone yet. "Pull over," she said. "What? Why?" "Just pull over." I did, and she retched out the window. She wiped her mouth and recomposed herself. "'Kay, let's go." "1 sec." I leaned out my own window and puked myself. We both took another few turns, like we were holding out until this moment, then set back out, ignoring the persisting smell of death. She wrung out her hair onto my seat. "There's showers in the town just past that ridge." "I've driven this way before. I don't remember any towns nearby." "Not for you, no. Where do you think I came from? I'm lane-locked." I stared questioningly. "Don't you know anything about how the road works?" she asked. "We're going my speed now. Otherwise, every lane-locked driver could just get a ride back to civilization with a faster driver. I was just in a town an hour ago." The explanation made sense. Otherwise, rescuing people like Tiff would be easy. It also explained why I hadn't seen her rig before she appeared in the storm. She'd been in her own pocket of the road I didn't have access to yet. The further we drove, the more unfamiliar the landscape appeared. We were only about a day from civilization, but I'd never driven here. In the far-off distance were familiar mountains, but they were smaller than I'd ever seen them, hours away rather than minutes. And the cars, I realized, we were no longer the only ones on the road. Jeeps and minivans rushed occasionally from the opposite direction, filled with families and couples. The other drivers had mentioned this would happen once the road elongated enough. It would start filling with other traffic, but I hadn't spent much brainpower on it. That point was still months away from me. I'd gotten so used to the eeriness of the empty road, this sun fullness was even eerier. You're new, aren't you? This is all still fresh to you? It is. I'm Autumn, by the way. Brendan. Well, Brendan, you're officially the first real person I've talked to this year, and you've done a splendid job reaffirming my hopes you're the last person I talk to this year. I really am sorry about your truck. Does Randall know about you? Hang on. He probably thinks I'm dead by now. Hand me the radio, would you? Radio? What Autumn felt under her leg in the pool of liquid. She pulled out the dripping handheld and attempted switching it on. Bad news. The town was quaint. I wondered if the variety of town was different for lane-locked individuals, a consolation prize of sorts, or if we'd just gotten lucky. There was a main street with hanging flowers from every light post, and a farmer's market at a nearby park full of running children. Best of all, though, the truck stop showers. After my experience at Tiff's Diner, I'd resolved never to shower on the road again. After a day like today, though, despite what the employee handbook says, some rules are meant to be broken. I spent a whole hour scrubbing effluvia and bits of rotted skin from my nails and hair. Even when I was done, I could smell dying carcass, but I spritzed myself with gas station air conditioner and called it good. Autumn had used the rest of my clothes on our drive to wipe herself down, so I also bought an XXL I Heart Beer shirt. I'm a medium, for the record. It was the only one left. A few minutes later, Autumn emerged from the shower rooms as well. "You're staring," she said. I was. "You look different." Then when I was covered in literal human secretions, yeah, I do. She gave me the once-over. "You look about the same." Then she stalked off imperiously before I could retort. What I hadn't said, though, the real reason I was staring, was this. Autumn looked undeniably like Myra. I don't point that out to say I was attracted to her. I can already imagine the comment section. Please, just don't. But it caught me off guard to be reminded of Myra like that. I'd finally stopped thinking about my ex-girlfriend, and here she was, on the road for the second time. Route 333 was mocking me. I spent hours scrubbing out my cab. By evening, it looked mainly clean, but the smell was baked into the seats. Absolutely wonderful. It wasn't like I had 8 more days of my trip ahead of me. Autumn didn't offer to help, which was pretty understandable. I'd gotten her truck destroyed, and now what? I was just going to abandon her in this town without transportation? She did, however, show up once evening was set and lean against the side of the trailer. She couldn't be much older than me, maybe even younger. "There's a motel just down the street," she said. "Not the coziest place, but you don't have to go down any side streets, so it's allowed. I stayed there all this week. It's cleaner than your sleeper, and not all towns are as docile at night as during the day." "How long have you been stuck out here?" I asked. Her expression darkened. "Take another shower. You reek worse than before." She marched away before I could respond. This was the second time she'd done that. I paused at the back of the freight before following after her. "Sorry about today. I'm sure you didn't ask to get caught in the meat storm. I suspect you didn't ask to be stuck in a trailer either." The thing said nothing. I leaned closer. "Do you want to come out?" It merely sniffled. That night was the best sleep I'd gotten on the road. Under any other circumstance, I would have been stressed beyond belief. Could the faceless man get into motel rooms? What about highway patrol? There was nothing in the employee handbook against sleeping outside of our vehicles, but I'd escaped most of my experiences here by merely hiding in the cab. Sleeping outside of it felt somehow wrong. I gave myself permission to relax. Autumn didn't seem concerned, and I'd been entirely ready to die earlier. Why should I freak out now? In the morning, I experienced something I hadn't for months, feeling rested. I grabbed an apple from the open breakfast area and headed outside for a walk around the parking lot. The morning sun colored the clouds pink and orange. It's always been fascinating to me, the fact that in photos, sunsets and sunrises look nearly identical. The only difference is the direction. "Brendan," I whirled. Randall waved at me from an alley just beyond the parking lot. His face was a mask of relief and fatigue. I blinked. "You're okay," he said. "We weren't sure after you stopped responding. We thought we weren't sure. I came straight here. I haven't slept all night." I blinked again. He pulled out a radio. "Gloria, we found him. He's all right. He ended up in Autumn's town. Brendan, come here. Say hi so she knows you're okay." I tilted my head. I walked forward to the lip of the side street. "I'm good," I said. "We survived." "She can't hear you. Here," he offered the radio in one hand. I didn't walk forward. "Brendan, take it." "Lucky you found me." "Tell me about it. None of the other truckers knew where you'd ended up. They told me not to come, but I had to search, and this seemed the most likely area. You're really fine. The cargo's okay." "Cargo's fine. Autumn's truck got obliterated, though." "You and I can go back in yours. She can take my car. Here, I'll show you." Randall gestured for me to follow him down the alley. I stayed put. "What is it?" I asked. "Sorry?" "The thing in my trunk. The living thing. Why do you all want it so badly?" "I'm not sure what you're—" "Oh, please. That Myra clone was more convincing than your sorry self. I've made mistakes before, but I'm not an absolute idiot." For a beat, just one, Randall looked offended. Then his expression dropped. He sneered in a cold, loathing fashion I'd never seen with the real Randall. "It doesn't belong to you, stone dweller." "No, but I don't think my cargo belongs to you either. At least I can take it where I want. That's right, isn't it? You can't come here onto the main road." It scowled without answering. "Try better next time." "We will devour you." "Maybe, but not yet." I pulled an Autumn and strolled away before I could reply. She found me behind my trailer. I don't know how she knew to look for me there or why she was even looking for me, but when Autumn found me, that's where I was. I contemplated the blood-splattered cargo doors. "Don't," she told me. "Don't what?" "You're a terrible liar. I know what you're thinking about doing, but it's not worth it." "You know what's inside?" She shoved her hands in a set of baggy pockets. "Management sucks. I knew this Randall you keep talking about. He's the worst. He really is. But that doesn't mean whatever's in there is dangerous. Terrible people can still be in charge of good causes." "What if we're the ones hurting it? What if I'm the only one that can help?" "Savior complex much?" "That's not—" She shrugged, and you guessed it, strolled away. That would get annoying quick. I didn't open the trunk, not that day, but I did stop by it before I headed out to rest, my hand on the cool metal. "I'll protect you, I promise. Wherever we're going, I promise you'll at least make it. The next time there was a storm, I would drive." Autumn came to wish me goodbye before I left, by which I mean she came to lecture me one final time. "Don't die," she said. "I'm not going to die. I'm not finished. Don't die. Then you won't be able to give me your truck on the return." "Yeah, that's not happening either. Autumn, I can't even come back to this town without you in the car." "I'm not finished." And not true. Now that you've been once, you can always come back. It's been added to your version of Route 333, which also unfortunately means your drive will be a bit longer. "That's fine." "Wasn't apologizing. This is all your fault and you owe me." She grew suddenly serious. You told me you're going past the 3-day mark, which sounds like it might already be farther than normal given how quickly you drive. Just be careful. Things can get odd, more than normal. Try to stay in your truck as much as you can and don't die. It almost sounds like you don't hate me nearly as much as you profess to. You're the only one that knows where I am now. Why can't you hijack one of the cars in town? She shuddered. Tried that once, will not be repeating. I opened my mouth, closed it, then asked the question she'd refused to answer yesterday. How long have you been lane locked? She glared at me. A lot of us give up when we get trapped, especially the older ones. I'm young though. It doesn't matter how long I've been here or how long it takes to escape. I'm not dying here. A long time then. Neither of us acknowledged the obvious truth. Autumn was further out than any other trucker, much further. Tiff was mere hours from the end of Route 333, but it would still be a decade or more for her to escape. Autumn, though, this far away, she may be young now, but she wouldn't exit until her 50s or 60s, if at all. It was all so unfair. We were both here, in the same spot, but she was trapped while I could be in the real world in less than a day. That spark, though, her stubborn determination. I was struck again with how much she looked like Myra. Here was somebody who'd been driving alone for multiple years, and she still managed to hold her chin up. Oh, and Brendan, she said. This isn't in the employee handbook, but hold your breath if you go through any tunnels. With that, she patted the side of my rig and marched away. Typical. 3 days. 3 more days until my final destination. With everything that happened the last 40-some-odd hours, it felt like weeks had gone by, but I was barely 2 days into my trip, less than that. With the forest dwellers, the meat storm, and autumn, I was hours off schedule. I'd be putting in a positively illegal number of hours to make it up. It wasn't that I thought some specific terrible thing would happen if I was late. It's just that the more time I spent with this particular cargo, the more chances some unknown terrible thing had to occur. I took Autumn's advice and stayed mostly in my truck. When I needed fuel, I stopped only at empty gas stations. I triple-checked the area was deserted before hopping out, and when it was time to sleep, I would stuff paper tissues into my nostrils for the smell. Who cared about the weather? There was no way I was leaving the windows open. Sure enough, the first night without Autumn, the faceless man was sniffing at my window. I blared my horn until he scampered away. The next day, I chanced a food run to a run-down general store along the main road. Within minutes, the employees went from friendly to frowning. Soon, they were collecting near the front doors with brooms, looking less and less human by the second. I slipped out the delivery door with my food basket without paying. Gas station employees started staring at me just a bit too long. At night, the highway would fill with thick, blinding mists. Heavy clouds seemed to sit always on the horizon, as if waiting for any excuse to descend. And the air? How to describe it? There was an oppressiveness, the fuzzy, weighted feeling just before a storm, but constant. You'll be fine, I reassured myself. As long as you stay in your truck, you're safe. The wailing was louder now. The childlike thing in the trailer would openly weep as I drove. Only when I pulled off and walked to the back would it stop, as if the thing was embarrassed to be caught. It was the afternoon of day 4, when I officially passed the furthest point I'd ever gone, an abandoned shopping mall. There'd never been much logic behind where dispatch sent us to drop off our trailers. Sometimes it was at empty warehouses, sometimes vacant grocery stores. The only requirement was that these drop-off points all had some sort of a loading dock, but apart from that, they were random, abandoned usually. I didn't know of any trucker who ever picked up a trailer. I slowed as I approached the pullout for the mall. Past this point was uncharted territory, a vast expanse of unknown. From what I gathered from Deidre and Vikram and the other drivers, almost none of them had been past this point. I pushed the gas. The eternal desert gave way to canyon. A fragile guardrail rose up to protect my multi-ton vehicle from sheer cliffs, and the straight road began twisting. Far below, a blackish river wound its way through meadows and thickets of birch trees. The road was empty. It had always been empty. Without Autumn, I was again the only vehicle on the road. Not that it stopped me from clenching my stomach around curves, but it was more than that. There were no birds. The very wind had given way to flat, dead air. When I stopped for a bathroom break on the side of the road, the stillness was maddening. "You all good?" I asked the trailer on one of these breaks. I headed back to the cab without waiting. I'd given up hoping that the thing would... A mutter. I scrambled back over and pressed my ear to the trailer. Watching. I stayed still. The thing had spoken. I'd suspected it could understand me before, but I hadn't been sure. Honestly, maybe it still couldn't, in the way parrots don't understand the human words they say, but this somehow felt intentional. "You're watching me?" I asked. Nothing. I waited some more. There were no more words, no more sobbing, not even audible breathing. Eventually, I started back on my way. What did it mean? What was it watching? Me? Or was it merely annoyed by my constant checkups? It wanted me to stop watching it? Could that be it? Then another thought, a cold one. What if I was misunderstanding entirely? I shuddered. A desire overwhelmed me to look up through the windshield, above me, at the infinite patient sky. I didn't. Instead, I did what any 20-something-year-old would do while their understanding of cosmic existence was being deconstructed and made anew. I switched on the radio. At least there would always be K-pop. The longer I drove, the more I noticed odd details. The leaves on trees looked almost correct, but if you slowed and focused, they weren't always connected to the branch. They would dangle there, suspended by nothing. On stretches of desert, tumbleweeds would roll across the road. There was still no wind. They would bounce in multiple directions at the same time, as if they weren't quite sure which way they were supposed to go, only that they should go somewhere. And the canyon river. If you squinted, it looked like a river, but when you examined it, there was no movement of water. It just sat there, entirely flat, despite the downward slope of the terrain. Sometimes you'd wind around a circular hill, far past the point you should have met up with road you'd already come down, except you never would. It just kept going in a loop. New scenery, new views, around the same limited circle, until finally the road would realize, "I've gone too long, haven't I?" and straighten out onto a brand new stretch of highway. The best comparison would be AI art. The first time you glance over it, nothing seems amiss. It's only when you study it that you notice six-fingered hands and strings of letters that aren't quite words. It's the impression of an image, more than anything, like a waking dream. The further I drove from the real world, the less real things seemed to be. Route 333 had the general idea of how physics worked, but kept forgetting the specifics. Or perhaps it merely didn't care. Why should it? Humans were never meant to be here, or especially get this far. What if I lane locked right now? The thought bubbled up from nowhere. I shoved it down. Well, tried to. I cranked up the music and sang along. Again, tried to. I didn't actually know the words. Why didn't I recognize this song? After 4 days of Station 96.2, I'd memorized most of the songs by now, but this one? It wasn't even K-pop. I went to switch it off. My hand didn't move. What the? Again I tried, but my grip on the steering wheel only tightened. I glanced down at the car radio, and oh no. The digital display no longer showed Station 96.2. Somehow, a slip of my hand or a bump in the road, the station had switched to 96.5, one of the forbidden stations. I let out a stream of profanity. At least my mouth still functioned correctly. I tried shifting my foot to the brake. It only pushed down on the gas harder. There was a volume dial on the steering wheel. If I could only raise my thumb and press down. Impossible, though. My limbs had ceased to function. My legs and hands, anything besides my face really, were no longer my own. Far in the distance, a curve in the road. The needle on my speedometer continued to rise. If I couldn't stop, I'd hurl over the edge, off the cliff, into the canyon. Already, the crunch of metal rang in my ears. A snap. Blackness. The guardrail ahead was already broken and missing. The road wanted nothing between me and the inevitable fall. The song on the radio would end. That was how I'd escape. It would end any second, and in the pause, I would punch the power button and seize control. It seemed so obvious. I'd always gotten lucky with these things. The creatures always stopped a second before they found me. I always woke up and saw the faceless man just before he could unlock my door. Another driver appeared as sacrifice right when the meat storm was preparing to crush me. I would get lucky now, too. Any moment, the song would end. I waited. It didn't. I expected numb resignation like had happened a few days previous. I'd given up so easily then, but what filled me now was scalding and sharp. None of this was fair. Why couldn't I both want to live and be allowed to? Before, whenever I'd wished to stop existing, something had always pulled me back. But now, when I was finally finding reasons to continue on, something was going to kill me anyways? Tiff needed me. Autumn did too, and Al, and the thing in the trailer had already been through so much this trip. It's ironic, I thought as the edge approached, how the things we would die for are the same things that make us afraid of dying. The injustice of it all bubbled up into my throat. It exploded out my mouth. I was screaming without intentionally choosing to. My throat burned, but I roared anyway. At the radio, the road, the universe, anything in all of it, everything and nothing. I screamed until it consumed me. It drowned out the world, overtook my vision, eliminated all sound. I slammed off the radio. The brakes screeched. The back of the truck whipped back and forth. The entire rig came to a stop a few meters short of the edge. For a good 5 minutes, I gripped the wheel with my foot planted firmly on the brake, doing nothing but try to control my breathing in shocked silence. It was only when I got out and peered over the edge that I realized why the guardrail in that particular section had already been torn away. A twisted freight container lay on its side hundreds of feet below. The cab lay a ways off, upside down and equally bent. Later, I used a spare ice scraper to gouge the stereo into pieces. Fun while it lasted. I drove the final day in silence. No cops pulled me over, no gas station attendants approached me with 2 wide smiles. Even the dark clouds on the horizon dissipated. It was like Route 333 had fired every last bullet at me, and now it could merely scowl from a distance, holding its empty pistol. I let my eyes glaze over the abnormalities of ever-degrading reality and drove. So much silence might have unpicked the threads of my sanity. It was why I always made sure to have music downloaded. Thoughts were always worse when there was nothing loud to chase them out. Now, though, with the sobbing thing in the trailer and Autumn trapped in a town only I could access, my mind was singular. I would get my cargo to its destination. I would keep it safe. When I did actually reach the drop-off point, I didn't feel relief, only a determination to finish the job. I'd driven up a mountain for hours, watching for the abandoned gas station Randall had described to me. Right when I expected to crest the summit, the road leveled out. The landscape in front of me stretched out to open, lush forest. Impossible. We should be at a peak. I should be gazing at miles of valley below. Laws of nature were barely a consideration anymore. All I cared about was the abandoned gas station at the side of the road. Randall's instructions were clear. I might loathe him, but even Autumn seemed to think I should follow his directions. I would leave the trailer at the loading bay, just like always, turn around and drive home. It took me some minutes to unhook the trailer, but eventually it detached. I set my hand on the back doors one final time. "We made it. You'll be safe here. Things will stop trying to capture you now." A child's voice sobbed in response. The thing usually stopped when I approached, but it cried openly now, as if it understood this was our final goodbye. How could I just leave it? Would something come to collect it? Who was responsible to keep it safe now? I fingered the lock. I didn't even have to look. I could simply unlock it so it had a way to get out once I was gone. If it had begged me, I never would have considered this. But it hadn't. Not once. It wasn't like hitchhikers begging for a ride. The thing had resigned itself to its situation, like Tiff, like I had in the past. "Be safe," I whispered. Before I could change my mind, I drove away. No more breaking rules, no more risks. And no looking back, I told myself, my own rule. It would only make things harder. I neared the curve that would carry me back to the mountain switchbacks. The ground shook. Around me, trees quavered. In my rear view, the abandoned gas station tilted. The earth around it opened like the yawning maw of a beast, and my trailer teetered on the edge. No! There was no time to turn the rig back around. I leapt out and sprinted the way I'd come. I reached the opening chasm just as the freight container wavered, then pitched forward into the darkness. Screaming, a child's screeches rose from the container as it tumbled downwards. The earth snapped closed with a sickening crunch of metal. Silence. You've all just spent the last few weeks reading about the first half of my 10-day trip. You're probably all geared up for my adventures on the return. You're excited for the details of more deadly situations in which I narrowly escape. There was none of that. I drove in silence. I spoke to no one. I didn't stop to shower, and I ate only what I could grab from gas stations. When I passed through Autumn's town, I kept driving. When I drove past Tiff's diner, I didn't stop. I took the occasional nap and drove through the nights. Nothing and no one attempted to stop me, not even the forest dwellers. For the first time, there was no supernatural stalling in the redwood section. They knew, like everything else, something terrible would befall them should they try to slow me down. When I finally pulled into the truck yard near nightfall, my resolve did not falter. I parked, downed an energy drink, then strolled through the dispatch center into Randall's office. His eyes bugged out from his skull. "Brendan, you're okay?" Calmly, I locked the door behind me. "What? How? Nobody's spoken to you in over a week. We thought you'd—" I slammed my foot into his chest. He and his chair crashed to the floor. I fell on him, pinned him down, and wrapped my hand around his mouth, pressing down with pounds of force. Wide, fearful eyes stared up. For once, they weren't mine. "You're right," I said. "We haven't spoken in so long. Let's have a chat, shall we?" I make no exaggeration when I inform you all that the pure terror in Randall's bulging eyes might still be the most satisfying sight of my existence. While I've never been a particularly massive guy, Randall was even less so. I had at least 40 pounds on his scrawny self. His attempts to push me off him were weak, pathetic things. I knelt on his chest and arms. One of my hands clamped over his mouth, the other squeezed his windpipe. "If I let you breathe, will you scream?" I asked. Despite my grip, he managed to jerk his head back and forth. I narrowed my eyes, then tentatively, cautiously loosened my grip. He screamed. It turned into a strangled whimper when I slapped him hard across the face. What a fragile thing, I mused. Power. People invent entire hierarchies in their minds based on job positions, societal norms, looks, and a million other trivialities. In the end, when you get to the raw, churning stomach of it, all that really gives you power over another person is what terrible things you can stomach to do to them. A line of red trailed from Randall's nose. His eyes were bloodshot. "That probably didn't feel good," I said. "Shall we try again?" He didn't nod, but once again I pulled my hands from his throat. This time he only gasped for breath. "You're psycho," he snarled. "Insane." "Indeed, a week alone on the road will do that to you." "We weren't trying to kill you. You should have just followed the rules." "I did follow the rules, thanks very much. Lucky for you, that isn't why I'm here." "Fine," he spat. "Take another raise. Just let me go." "Wrong again." I paused. "Yeah, I will take that though, thanks. No, I'm here because we had a bargain. I fulfilled my end. Your turn." "I know." He wriggled to free his arms but gave up. "For goodness sake, Brendan, you didn't even let me say hello. You really think so low of me that I forgot about our agreement? You could have just sat down like a sane human being and we could have had this conversation civilly. You didn't even give me a chance." But this is your chance. Please understand, I am fully prepared to harm, break, maim, fill in whatever pain-inducing verb you desire if you try to lie to me. I haven't actually done anything to you yet, have I? Hopefully, after this warning, I won't need to. Does that make sense? He swore at me. I shoved him hard against the ground, and his head smacked the wood. Does that make sense? Okay, just let me up. I'll answer your questions. I did. I patted under his desk for a panic button. Nothing. And sifted through his drawers for a gun. None. Finally, I gestured for him to take his seat. His receding hair was in disarray, his chin dripping with blood. I remained standing between him and the locked door. "No lies," I said. "What do you want to know?" "What was the thing in my trailer?" He grimaced, sighed, and raised his hands in submission. "Honestly, I don't know. Management is secretive. They won't—" I punched him in the face. Pretty much all I knew about punching was to keep your thumb outside your fist, otherwise you might break it. Judging by the crunching, the screaming, and the altogether outpouring of blood, I'd guess I'd done a decent job. I shook the pain from my own arm. "I repeat, no lying. Do we understand this time?" He clutched his nose, broken for sure, and moaned. Blood flowed from his cupped hands. I pulled back my arm. "Understand?" He whimpered but nodded and shrank back into his seat, pale and shuddering. "Very good," I said. "Let's try once more. What was the thing in my trailer?" But first, a pause. To understand the disaster that comes next, I need to rewind a few weeks, explain a few things. I realize now that while I've done a decent job at describing my experiences on Route 333, I've woefully neglected saying much about headquarters. From what I can tell, other trucking companies often have things separated out. The truck yard is in one place, offices and dispatch, not that most have dispatch the same as us, might be in another. Here, though, it's all lumped together, one enormous parking lot at the edge of the forest, a mile or two from the nearest town, a double-story office building in the center. Route 333 starts just a few bends of the road away. The truck yard is the same place we pick up our rigs, drop off our keys, and hang out before we head home. It's rare we overlap, but when we do, it somehow always turns into a group of us, not just 2 or 3. Maybe the others plan this in a secret chat without me. Despite my ever-deepening people aversion, I don't mind running into other truckers, even if they're decades older than me. They're usually also people-averse people, which makes the exchanges easier. "Oh, you feel awkward too? Great, let's keep this quick." We can greet in the break room to chat, grab sodas, or when there's enough of us, an occasional round of poker. So it was a few weeks ago when I discovered, after 6 consecutive rounds of sliding red chips into the pot, that I was in fact incompetent at poker. "Okay, I'm out," I said. "Bah!" Chris shoved a cigarette in his mouth. He couldn't actually smoke them inside, but he liked the taste, apparently. What are they teaching young people these days? First, no more smoking with your teachers. Now, no more gambling addictions? We've really gone off the deep end, I agreed. Vikram pulled the sizable pot of chips to join his mountain of a pile. Entertaining as this has been, I must agree with the boy. I should be getting home. "Garbage," Chris said. "You're just hightailing it with our money before we can win it back." "With what?" Vikram eyed Chris's handful of white chips, even more pitiful than my own. "Just a few more rounds," Deidre insisted. "Really, my wife will be expecting me." "Message her you'll be late," Chris said. "Not likely. There's never reception here." Deidre oiled her eyes. I'd have to agree. I'd almost never had an issue sending messages or calling. "No, really," Vikram insisted. He demonstrated his phone and the no signal tag that yet again popped onto the screen. That's how we learned about the line. It took some experimenting. We tested with each of our phones and carriers, but eventually we learned an invisible line perfectly bisected the break room. On one side, full bars. On the other, not even texts could get through. "You guys didn't know about this?" I asked. Deidre shook her head. "I'm usually connected to the Wi-Fi. Suppose it makes sense, though, since we're a ways from town in the middle of a building." "Let's not forget the important thing," Chris said. "Vikram can now text his wife, and I can now win back my money." Vikram did. Chris didn't. "It wasn't human," Randall said, "if that's what you're worried about." His voice came out stuffy, as if he'd shoved his nose full of cotton balls. He spit blood in the trash can under his desk. It was an impossibility, Randall said. That's what we call them, impossibilities, paradoxes manifested in the physical, things from another place. Sometimes they're alive, like the one from your recent trip, but usually you're only transporting non-sentient ones, physical paradoxes and whatnot. Like what? They're not comprehensible, that's the issue. Plants that are both alive and dead, water cups that are both full and empty. They're an infection. If you leave them too long somewhere in the real world, they start to spread and affect stable things around them. I once heard of an entire neighborhood where every person turned inside out because the impossibility didn't get taken care of in time. Well, the thing in my trailer sounded like a human, a child, crying. First off, you shouldn't be talking to it. Second, the forest dwellers sound human enough too. The inhabitants of the road, the ones who work at the gas stations, they all seem like people, but they're not. They are. I remembered what Tiff told me nearly 10 days ago now. They're just a different type of real. Sure, fine, whatever you need to believe. They're not human, though. That thing in your trailer? Do you know any child who could go 5 days without food or water? It was still alive. It was malevolent, Randall said. If you'd let it out, that thing would have dissected you piece by piece in whatever order kept you alive the longest. I don't believe you. He snorted. Or tried to. The wince on his face reminded both of us his nose was still very much broken. You can't stand yourself, Randall said. What? The shift in his voice was so sudden, I experienced a wave of vertigo. That was why you took this job, wasn't it? You were trying to run from something in your old life, but you've realized the thing you were running from was you all along. You don't know anything about me. You despise yourself, and now you look for any excuse to continue despising yourself. Here Randall was, covered in blood from a wound I'd given him, and yet he'd once again resumed his position of authority. His hands were folded neatly, his body bent just a degree in my direction, as if to signal that, yes, Brendan, I am still your owner. In the end, you will still do what I say and believe what I tell you. Any trace of his fear for me was gone, replaced entirely by smugness. So infuriatingly smug. You know what I think? I asked. I think if our cargo really were so evil, you and the rest of management would have told all of us from the start. Why shouldn't you? Me and the rest of your lackeys would be more than happy to help. Instead, you hide the truth, which means there's something that's worth hiding. That's what I think. I drew a box cutter from my pocket, extended the blade, and rested it on the desk. Randall's smirk faltered. Let's continue, I said. You forgot these. I trotted up to Chris, dangling his keys, who waited for me at the doors of his rig. We'd both just come from a breakfast with Tiff. Breakfast at Tiffany's. Yeah, I got it. Even rarer than the days when we all happened to meet in the break room were the days we happened to meet up at Tiff's. I think we all went out of our way, if merely subconsciously, to fill up at her truck stop when reasonably justifiable and visit for a few minutes. She was lonely. She had no one. When she heard we were coming over her radio, she would spend hours preparing a full buffet breakfast of burnt bacon, watery eggs, and soggy pancakes. The least we could do was eat. Plus, she was still the only place to get a decent cup of coffee. Much obliged, Chris said, taking the keys. Don't tell management, but my memory's not what it used to be. Happens to all of us. He sighed. Maybe, sometimes I forget the way to Route 333. I leave from dispatch and I just forget. It isn't even far. It all just looks unfamiliar. I considered. You are pretty old. He laughed and slapped me on the back of my head. I'll still whoop you in poker. I laughed too. He wouldn't, though. Chris was worse at poker than me. Route 333 is a corridor between two worlds, or possibly multiple worlds. We don't know totally, just that it's the only way to get rid of the impossibilities. It sounds like they keep getting through, though. Wouldn't it be better to seal off the road entirely? Randall shook his head. Paradoxes fall randomly into our world, not by the road. There's whole teams dedicated to predicting where and when. Route 333 is merely one of the stable ways to get them back. Okay, I tried to wrap my head around this all. So we're taking them back to the place they came from. That's what our cargo is. Not exactly. I gripped the box cutter and nodded pointedly at it. Geez, Brendan, take a Xanax. I'm trying to explain this. It's not so simple, okay? The highway is like, well, like nothing. It's like the nothing between the repelling sides of two magnets. It's not actually its own thing. All it wants is that these two magnets don't touch. You're not taking things back to their origin because the road won't let you. It recognizes you don't belong over there, and it stops you, or tries to. Someone like you who can traverse the road so quickly could probably make it. It would take weeks. You'd be driven mad by the time you arrived, but you could do it. Usually, the most we can do is drop them off far out on highway and hope they take up residence. The creatures on the road, I started. The faceless man and highway patrol, they're all just living impossibilities we removed from this world. Some of them. Others we're not so sure about. Faceless man has his own set of rules. I'm not sure if he was our doing or something else entirely. The forest dwellers were cargo once, long before my time. But they're so close. Why don't they just come back? Close for you. For them, they're hundreds of years from escaping. Like I said, the road knows they don't belong here. They're lane-locked. For a moment, just a moment, Randall's expression faltered. Almost like guilt, perhaps. Why did they all want the thing in my trailer? I asked. The road can be known to make deals at times. They trap another living impossibility in their place and get to proceed freely. They could cross back to our world in hours, just as long as the balance of it all is maintained. The road is sentient, then. Not in the sense you're thinking. A computer isn't sentient, but it calculates. Is it evil? Is a computer evil? Randall threw back at me. Fair enough. Everything he'd explained, it raised so many more questions, but there was a sense of overall cohesion. The explanation flowed quickly. He wasn't merely spouting off nonsense or making up lies. There were so many more things I needed to ask. Why no phones? What about the meat storm? Who collected these impossibilities? But one question would drive to the heart of it all. Why don't you just tell us? I asked. If this is all true, if we're really preventing infections in the real world, then why not just include this as a section in the employee manual? Why so much mystery? To be fair, you haven't even read the employee manual. I've read most of it. I calmed myself. It isn't in it, though, right? Nah. Then why? He shifted uncomfortably. He made a grand show of glancing at the clock, stalling. I'd hit on something. We'd finally reached the part Randall was truly dreading. My shift ended half an hour ago. They're going to come looking for me. You can't keep me here forever. I can for now. What will you do when somebody else comes? Fight both of us? This was a dumb idea and you know it. Let me go now and I promise. I slammed my fist on the desk. Answer the question. They'll see my car, Randall continued. They'll know I'm here. They'll come find me. I laughed. They won't see a thing. The streetlight was burnt out. Your office door is closed. We have all night. Are you joking? His voice was calm, slow, each word enunciated. His eyes were wide. The streetlight? Was it really out? Yeah? I've never understood what it meant for somebody's face to go white. I always assumed it was an expression, a way to say scared or nervous, a descriptive phraseology, if you will. Turns out, I was wrong. Randall's face went entirely, completely white. He swore. "We need to go. I'm not joking. This isn't me trying to get out of our interrogation. Brendan, if the streetlight is really out, it might already be too late." "We're staying," I gnarled. "I'm not falling for another lie." "I'll answer anything you want later, literally anything, I swear it, on my wife and kids." "You don't have kids." "On my future kids, okay? But we need to go." His voice lowered to a whisper. "Please." It was that word that caught me off guard. I'd seen Randall in a variety of situations now. I'd seen him angry and laughing, smug and terrified. I'd never, however, heard him beg. It took me so by surprise, it might have actually worked. I might have believed him and put down the switchblade and done what he said. Before I could, he seized a glass mug and lobbed it at the one and only light. The light snapped out. Glass shattered. Out of instinct, I covered my head to avoid the raining shards. Just enough time to miss the scramble at a lock, the opening of a door. "No!" I roared, but he was gone. I tore after him, down the hall. All lights except the late-night emergency ones were out, and the luminescent exit signs. Shadows lengthened. I caught the flash of a heel around the corner, the slam of a hallway door. I knew where he was going, down the stairs. I took a side stairwell. Just as he reached the bottom floor, I launched myself at him. We toppled. Randall screamed and kicked under my weight. "You don't understand." It was true. I didn't. Very likely something very terrible was about to occur, but what I did know was that I was fed up. No more half-truths and blind orders. I spent a week thinking I was protecting some helpless creature. Maybe it hadn't been, but I thought it was. My life was whiplash, existential crisis after existential crisis, and I didn't even get to know why. "What aren't you telling me?" I demanded. "Let me go." I shoved him once, twice, thrice against the ground. "You're not leaving. You're not escaping. I am the one in control. Answer." "We know. Before a trucker gets lane locked, we always know." "What?" "It's a trade. Them for you newbies. There are signs we don't tell you about. Route 333 marks the next candidate it wants to claim, and we make sure it gets them. Otherwise, none of you could traverse Route 333. We can't let that happen. It's too important." "Who's next?" I demanded. "Chris. Now let me go, please." Some subconscious, simmering part of me wanted to hit him, to keep hitting him until he was nothing but a bloody pulp. A different part of me, though, did what he asked. Randall stumbled to his feet, gasping in the darkness of the reception room. "How dare you all?" I said. "You sacrifice us like—" "We're not alone." He tapped his lips with a single finger and signaled at the street-facing windows. It was all I needed to shut up. The mood shift was stark and definite. As much as I loathed him, as much as my blood boiled and my fists screamed to lash out, I forced myself to crouch next to him behind the reception desk. In the darkness of the parking lot, something moved. "What is it?" I whispered. Something only the streetlights were keeping at bay. Our circuits must have tripped. "Why would that matter? Isn't the city powering the street lamps?" "We're not part of the city." "That doesn't make any sense." "We're on the road." It took me a full 10 seconds to register what he meant. Not just any road. We were on that road. Dispatch was located on Route 333. I nearly told him he was wrong. The idea was ridiculous. The highway didn't start for a few more streets. We were safe here. I'd used my phone in the truck yard, for goodness sake, and no meat storm had ever appeared. Then I remembered the break room. The clear line of reception versus no reception. What if it wasn't just the break room? What if headquarters was divided by the boundary between two worlds, a boundary that didn't allow communication from one side to the other? And Chris, telling me he would forget the way from dispatch to the start of Route 333. What if he wasn't forgetting? What if the way was just changing, lengthening? Randall and I held our breath as the thing outside once again shifted. I hate you, I said. I assure you the feeling's mutual. Quick recap from last week. I just assaulted Randall in his office, broke his nose, no regrets, and learned that management has been sacrificing us employees to Route 333 for years. Older truckers were getting intentionally lane locked so us newer truckers could travel freely. Oh, and it turned out headquarters was located on the edge of Route 333 this whole time. Also, something was lurking outside in the darkness. Am I missing anything? Whose damn idea was it to build the truck yard on the highway? I whispered. Randall and I crouched behind a desk in the main lobby. The only light came from the blue screen of the receptionist's monitor and stars barely visible above the far-off tree line. The blackness beyond the front windows was perfectly tranquil. For now. That's what you're worried about, Randall hissed. If whatever's out there is going to eat us, I'd at least enjoy the comfort of blaming somebody. It had to be this way. Nothing can communicate across the barrier between Route 333 and the real world. This is the only place dispatch could radio you on the road. Funny, I just spent a week without a radio and I'm fine. Not to mention, we'd have nowhere to store the impossibilities. What? Is there some sort of secret bunker under the ground? I laughed. He remained silent. Oh my gosh, there is a secret bunker. The longer the impossibilities spend in the real world, the more they unravel it. I risked my life every day coming here to work. You should be grateful. Oh yeah, positively weeping with gratitude. Quick question. What was that you said earlier about sacrificing us to the road? Randall made a low guttural noise and whirled on me. Look, Brendan, I get that you're angry, I do, okay? And yet, right now, I'm the one with a messed up nose, and somehow I'm setting that aside, because there is a thing outside. Likely, it's searching for a way to cut all electricity. Pretty soon, it will find one. Let's postpone discussing how much we hate each other until after, yeah? It was nothing I hadn't already gotten from Randall for weeks. Postponing, redirecting my questions, false promises of answers that he would never give. As it happened, though, this was the one time that he might actually have a point. I forced myself to exhale. My shoulders relaxed. What do we need to do? The lights outside. We have to get them back on. The breaker must have tripped when janitorial was here earlier with the vacuums. It should be self-resetting, but I'm guessing it's broken. We'll have to manually do it. We don't check that regularly. This seems like a big deal. Usually, yes, but we've been scrambling to find a replacement for you this week. I held back multiple snide comments. Fine, a breaker isn't bad. Where's the control panel for the streetlights? Behind the building, outside. Delightful. And we can't just cross over to the regular world until the morning, fix the lights then? We're already near the boundary. He shook his head. It could follow us over. The road dwellers don't have an issue passing across. It just usually takes them a while to get here. The only thing keeping this one from leaving years ago were the streetlights. If we don't get them back on, it will escape. Still crouching, Randall pulled open the drawers of the receptionist's desk one by one and rifled through them. He pulled something small and cylindrical from one and handed it to me. A pen light. You shouldn't need it, but just in case. Light should keep it at bay. I clicked it on and off. A thin light lit up the space beneath the desk. Not much, but something. When I say go, you turn on the lights in here, he said. It should get distracted watching you, but it shouldn't be able to attack while they're on. I'll run for the back. The plan sounded reasonable enough. I nearly said yes. Me in here, in the light, safe, sounded great. And yet, you distracted, I said. I'll go flip the breaker. Now's not the time to be noble, Brendan. I let out a laugh the temperature of ice. I trust big insurance more than I trust you. If I'm the one flipping the breaker, I know you're incentivized to keep me alive until that thing's gone. Otherwise, you'll sacrifice me to save yourself. You'd be safer in here. So you say, but there's always a catch with you, isn't there? You don't even know where the fuse box is. I do, actually. I notice things. Just give me the keys. I glanced purposefully where they dangled from his belt. Why do you have to make everything... We cut off when for one brief, glorious moment, the outside streetlights came on all by themselves. The illumination through the windows grew brighter and brighter. No, I realized, not streetlights at all. Headlights. A red SUV pulled into a spot near the doors. Lights flooded the front lobby, then all at once switched off, leaving us momentarily blind. A car door thumped closed. No! Beside me, Randall sprang for the lobby lights, but it was too late. Gloria approached the entrance, fiddling with set of keys. Before she could reach them, darkness congealed around her. It came from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. A cloud of dust, suddenly sentient. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, the darkness poured down her throat like oil into an engine. She scrabbled at her neck, but how did you fight the air itself? Her skin puffed outwards. She was a balloon filling with water. Gloria's movement slowed until she just stood there, arms outstretched, expression vacant. The lobby lights flashed on, but too late. The blackness pouring into her had already been slowing. The grinding began. As much as I hate it, there's only one word that describes what came next with any sort of justice. Blender. It was the crunching, whirring scream of solid things being made liquid. Like a blender, her outer body maintained its shape, even while the insides ground themselves up. Eventually, she turned to the side, opened her mouth, and released a long stream of what used to be her insides. Red, chunky, fragments of splintered bone intermixed. She straightened back into her original shape. It must be dark underneath that skin. The new Gloria turned to us. Her eyelids were closed to hold out the light. She drew out her keys. "Go!" shouted Randall, but I needed no encouragement. I sprang at him, ripped his own keys from his belt loop, and dashed away. The lobby doors crashed open behind me. Predictably, because my luck is oh so wonderful, it was me the footsteps followed. "Randall went the other way," I called back helpfully. It was a strange reversal of situations. Just minutes ago, I was the one chasing someone down these stairs. Now I was the one being chased up them. I must say I preferred the former. As I ran, I switched on all the lights. I didn't care if the thing was now confined inside a body. It could still come out at any time. The new Gloria seemed to have a similar idea. Behind me, glass shattered and hallways went black. My escape routes were shrinking. No, really, Randall is a much easier a target. I even take him. She wasn't interested. I fumbled with the break room light switch. It took me too long to find it in the dim, and Gloria pounced at me. Her nails raked my face and arms. I tried to scramble away, but she wrapped herself around my leg. Her teeth sank into my calf. "Mother trucker!" I kicked her in head. Not at her head, mind you. In. It literally caved inwards. For one beautiful moment, I thought I'd killed her. Then the dent popped right back out. Right, she was only skin now. My pathways were limited now. I had to get outside. That much was obvious. But how? She was on my tail. The only other staircase to get downstairs would force me across already darkened hallways. My pulse pounded. My lungs begged. I couldn't last longer. I passed Randall's office. An idea struck me. It was already dark in the room from when Randall had exploded the overhead bulb, but the hallway was illumination enough to ward off complete darkness. I flung myself at the desk. "Where is it? Where is it?" Gloria rammed into me. I tried shoving her off, but her mouth latched onto my neck. She tore into my flesh. I bellowed and collapsed. There, fallen under the desk, sprinkled with broken glass, was the box cutter from earlier. I snatched it and stabbed backward at Gloria's face. I pulled down with the clean, ripping sensation of scissors through paper. She fell off me, clasping at her head. Blackness writhed behind the gash in her face. Her hands pinched the skin, trying and failing to hold herself together. Rolls of darkness spilled from the gaps. I drove the box cutter into her leg and tore upwards. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. There was nothing tangible beyond her open jaws. She clutched her leg too, but the endeavor was like keeping water in a Ziploc bag with multiple holes. I didn't wait to see what happened next. No longer did I bother with the lights. My feet carried me through the hall, down the stairs, and out the back door. There it was, the electrical box illuminated by an orange moon. A false moon, I now knew. My trembling hands fumbled with the ring of keys. Which was it? I tried one, no use. I tried the next, still it didn't work. Above me, a glass shattered. A cloud of dust exploded out into the night. Not yet. I needed more time. Forget this. I tossed the keys to the ground and yanked at the metal panel to the breaker box. Surely I could tear the flimsy thing open. It rattled. It pried apart at my force. Then the blackness descended on me. I fumbled for my pen light and shone it out. The dim light did almost nothing. The cloud avoided the direct light, but there were so many angles, and I couldn't cover all of them. It was no use. My eyes squeezed shut, my mouth clamped down. I used my index fingers to plug my ears and my thumbs to cover my nostrils. I waited for the force of 1,000 pounds of sand to slam into me, but it never came. Instead, the coldness was a breeze on my neck, lighter than pillow fluff. It had nowhere to enter, and yet it surrounded me. The coldness slithered around my hands, searching, hunting for a path in. It didn't need to burrow into me. I got the sense it couldn't. All it had to do was wait until I gave in and peeked with one eye or opened my mouth to breathe. For those of you out there who are experienced in the art of holding your breath, I applaud you. That's never been my talent, though. In high school, I joined the swim team for all of 2 weeks before realizing that, oh wait, humans don't actually have gills, thank you very much. On a good day, my record is maybe a minute? Less perhaps. Believe me, during the few chances I've timed myself, I start out with good intentions, strength of will, fortitude of character, what if there's a flash flood in my apartments, etc. But it's always somewhere around second 40 I begin considering alternative ways to build character. Even right then, with the embodiment of a blender congealing around me, I could feel myself slipping. And why did it matter? In the end, this being was the blackness that had existed since before our planet formed. It had waited 1 billion years to feel the warmth of living organs. No matter how long I lasted, it could last longer. Don't open your mouth. Do not breathe. And then I did. For one terrible moment, the coldness flooded in, past my lips and toward my throat. It thrummed with excitement, a vessel to move freely. It would take better care of me than the last one. Lights exploded in front of me. The darkness burst outwards in all directions in a mad bid to escape. I gasped. "The breaker!" Randall screamed. He gestured frantically from the cab of my own truck, where he'd blasted the headlights. I wasted no time. It took only 2 keys this time before the lock twisted and the panel flew open. As for the breakers, I flipped them all at once. Immediately, familiar streetlights flared to life, filling the entire truck yard with wonderful, life-sustaining light. From there, everything went hazy. Between the adrenaline, minutes without oxygen, 50 seconds, and my sleep deprivation from the past week, reality turned kaleidoscopic. I do remember an arm around my shoulder as someone led me inside and up the stairs. "My office," they said. Guess he found Gloria. I did try to help her, you know. I looked up from the break room table. It was several hours later, and I sipped a cup of coffee. I hadn't wanted to risk the drive home. Things hadn't felt quite real enough to trust myself behind a wheel, so I'd slept a few hours in my rig. Now it was early morning. Randall stood in the doorway. His nose was splinted from what I could tell with some sort of aluminum strip. It reminded me of those metallic bracelets from elementary school that curl when you slap them around your wrists, but go rigid when you straighten them. "I saw," I told him. "There was nothing you could have done for Gloria. She arrived too quickly." "Not Gloria. Tiff." He poured himself a cup from my coffee pot, then immediately spit it out. "This is practically water." "It's my 3rd cup. Thought I should slow down." He dumped it, set a new batch to brew, and took a seat across from me. We were drivers at the same time, me and Tiff. Bet you didn't know that, huh? That I used to be a driver too? All of us were at one point, even Gloria. It's not just like you can hire somebody to do what I do right off the bat. How would you ever explain all of this to them? He waved his hand vaguely in front of him as if to imply I should know exactly what this was he was referring to. I did, to be fair. He continued, "We'd chat over the radio, even after I moved into a dispatch position, sometimes for hours. When she lane locked, I was just like you. It tore me up. I searched for ways to get her out, but we're not doing this," I said. "Doing what?" "You're trying to humanize yourself. Don't. We're not chummy because we escaped the same traumatic event. Just because you can prove you've ever had feelings doesn't excuse what you and the rest of management are doing. So stop. Just stop." Randall stared at me. He shut off the burgling coffee pot, sat back down, and sipped from his own mug in contemplation. "Fine then. Here's how things are. You saw that thing out there? The one that turned Gloria into a human smoothie. There's hundreds of those things out there in the real world, some sentient, some not, but all that destroy just as easily. There's no killing them, there's no reasoning with them or locking them up, there's only the road." He leaned toward me with an utter look of disgust. "It's wrong what we do, it's unjustifiable, and it's despicable. When Route 333 marks one of you to get lane locked, we do nothing to stop them. Sometimes we even encourage that person to go on extra long hauls to help things along, because we've learned if the road doesn't get what it wants, there are consequences for the rest of you. It's abhorrent what we do. That's what I've heard for years, but the one thing I haven't heard ever is a better solution." He tilted his head. "Please, Brendan, do tell me yours." I stayed quiet. Thought so. I wanted to rage like last night. I wanted to scream and threaten and punch. All the fight was gone, though. I was exhausted. The hate simmering in me toward Randall, I couldn't seem to locate it anymore. He paused at the door. "You're right, we aren't chummy now. I don't expect you to forgive me. I certainly don't plan to forgive you." He pointed at his nose. "But I will ask that you stay as a driver for a while longer. You know what's at stake now. Don't give up." He left. I laughed. Don't give up? Randall clearly had. Tiff had too. Everybody I knew seemed to have given up in some major way, and I was no exception. Taking this job was me doing that very thing in regards to my old life. So where did I go from here? How did I give up my giving up? I couldn't. That was the truth of it. The choice wasn't in my hands anymore. Even with this new, terrible knowledge, I simply had to stay. I had to find a better solution. That's what I'd announced to the road weeks ago, wasn't it? That I would help Tiff, right before it attempted to drown me to prove a point. At the time, I'd taken it as a threat, and it was, of course it was. But it was something else, too. Why would Route 333 have cared to warn me off if there was something to warn me off from? This was Randall all over again. I'd only known he was hiding some terrible secret because it was obvious he was also hiding less terrible things. The road tried to stop me from helping Tiff because there was, in fact, a way to do so, and I was close. It was afraid.